The overhead bins rattled as turbulence shook the plane. But the real storm wasn't outside. It was in the business class cabin, where expensive cologne mixed with judgment. Michael Carter stood in the aisle, his weathered hands gently guiding his 7-year-old daughter Sophie to their seats. His faded jeans and simple hoodie stood in stark contrast to the tailored suits and designer dresses surrounding them. The stuffed rabbit in Sophie's arms, worn from years of love, one ear slightly frayed, drew disapproving glances from nearby passengers. Vanessa Pearson, immaculately dressed in a cream designer suit with pearls that caught the cabin lights, leaned toward her husband, her voice deliberately loud enough to carry. "I thought business class had standards. Economy must be completely full." Her diamond rings flashed as she gestured subtly toward Michael and Sophie. James Thompson, CEO of Thompson Defense Technologies, adjusted his Italian silk tie and nodded in agreement, his eyes narrowing behind designer glasses. "Probably used points or got a sympathy upgrade," he muttered, returning to his financial report with a dismissive flick of his wrist. "Look at those boots. Probably spent his last dime on this ticket." Michael caught every word but kept his expression neutral. His focus remained on Sophie, whose small fingers tightened around her stuffed rabbit as they found their seats. The seatbelt sign chimed above them, bathing the cabin in soft blue light. "Is Whiskers buckled in too, sweetie?" Michael asked, his voice soft but carrying a depth that suggested strength beneath its gentleness. Sophie nodded, carefully arranging the worn rabbit on her lap. "Row 12, window in middle," the flight attendant confirmed, her practiced smile never quite reaching her eyes as she took in their appearance. "Can I verify your boarding passes again?" The question carried a subtle challenge. Michael handed over the tickets without comment. His calloused hands that had once guided aircraft through war zones, now simply waited patiently as the attendant scrutinized the boarding passes with unnecessary thoroughness. "These appear to be in order," she finally admitted, returning them with visible surprise. "Enjoy your flight." Sophie looked up at her father, confusion clouding her blue eyes so like her mother's that sometimes it took Michael's breath away. "Dad, why was she looking at our tickets so long? Did we do something wrong?" Michael's smile was gentle as he helped Sophie with her seatbelt. "No, sweetheart. Sometimes people see what they expect to see, not what's actually there." The engines roared to life, and Sophie's small body tensed immediately. Her breathing quickened, her knuckles whitening as she clutched Whiskers tighter. The familiar signs of her anxiety emerged like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "Dad," she whispered, voice trembling. "It's happening again. I can't breathe right." This was the moment Michael had been preparing for. Sophie's fear of flying wasn't just ordinary nervousness. It had begun 3 years ago, after the accident, after Rebecca. The memory flashed through Michael's mind, his wife's fall from their apartment balcony as she reached out to save a neighbor's child who had climbed over the railing. The funeral, Sophie's nightmares, the therapy sessions. "Look at me, Sophie," Michael said, his voice steady as the aircraft began to taxi. "Remember what Dr. Miller taught us? 5 things you can see." Sophie's eyes were wide with panic, but she nodded shakily. "Whiskers, the seat, your watch, that lady's pearls, the clouds outside." "Good. 4 things you can touch." Her small fingers moved with purpose. "Whiskers' ear, the seatbelt, your hand, my shoes. 3 things you can hear. The engine, people talking, your voice." As the plane accelerated down the runway, Sophie's breathing gradually steadied. Michael began to hum softly, a lullaby Rebecca had sung to Sophie since she was an infant. The familiar melody seemed to wrap around them like a protective shield. "Honestly," Vanessa Pearson sighed loudly from across the aisle, "some people shouldn't travel if they can't control their children. Economy is full of people who shouldn't even be flying." Sophie's eyes filled with tears, her progress instantly threatened by the harsh words. Michael felt a familiar heat rise in his chest, not the impulsive anger of his youth, but the measured, controlled response he'd developed through years of command decisions under pressure. "Sometimes," he said, his voice carrying just enough to reach Vanessa without addressing her directly, "the bravest people on this plane are the smallest ones fighting the biggest fears." The plane lifted off, pressing them back into their seats. Sophie squeezed her eyes shut, her lips moving in a silent counting exercise her therapist had taught her. Dad, she whispered when the initial climb stabilized. Why do we have to fly when it scares me so much? Couldn't we have driven to the ocean? Michael gently tucked a strand of blonde hair behind Sophie's ear. Sometimes, sweetheart, we have to fly through our fears to reach the places we need to go. Remember what we always say about Whiskers? Sophie looked down at her rabbit, a faint smile touching her lips. Whiskers isn't brave because he's not scared. He's brave because he keeps going even when he is scared. That's right, and today you're just as brave as Whiskers. The seatbelt sign dinged off and the cabin crew began their service. A young flight attendant named Olivia Chen approached their row, her professional demeanor softening slightly as she observed the tenderness between father and daughter. Can I get you anything to drink? She asked, her eyes lingering for just a moment on Michael's face with a flicker of something. Recognition, perhaps, though she couldn't quite place it. Apple juice for my daughter, please. Just water for me. As Olivia moved on, the cabin lights flickered briefly. A minor disruption, but Michael's eyes immediately scanned the overhead panels, his mind automatically calculating possible causes. A habit from another life. James Thompson had been watching this exchange with mild interest, his attention caught by Michael's calm demeanor during Sophie's anxiety attack. There was something in the man's bearing that didn't match his worn clothing, a confidence that seemed at odds with his apparent economic status. The first bout of turbulence hit without warning. The plane dropped suddenly, then stabilized. Drinks sloshed, passengers gasped, and several electronic devices clattered to the floor. Sophie whimpered, clutching Whiskers tighter. It's okay, Michael reassured her, his hand steady on hers. Just air pockets, like bumps on a road. The captain's voice came over the intercom, steady and professional. Folks, we're experiencing some light turbulence as we pass through a weather system. Please return to your seats and keep your seatbelts fastened until the sign turns off. As the announcement ended, all the cabin screens flickered, then went dark for several seconds before rebooting with error messages. Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. This wasn't standard behavior for aircraft systems during turbulence. Something else was happening. Across the aisle, a young man in his mid-20s pulled out his phone, angling it to capture Sophie's frightened face and Michael's worn hoodie. Kyle Parker, social media content creator with a channel dedicated to travel fails, saw an opportunity for engagement. Hey, he stage whispered to his girlfriend and beside him, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Check out economy class in business. Bet they'll be asking for extra peanuts to take home. Sophie didn't understand the mockery, but she sensed the unkindness in his tone. She shrunk further into her seat, embarrassment now compounding her fear. Michael didn't acknowledge Kyle directly. Instead, he focused entirely on Sophie, creating a bubble around them with his attention. Tell me what you're most excited to see at the ocean, he prompted. Dolphins, Sophie whispered, latching onto the distraction. And those little crabs that dig holes. And I want to build a sandcastle bigger than me. We'll do all of that, Michael promised. I brought your special blue shovel in our luggage. The plane shuddered again, more violently this time. Overhead bins popped open, sending several bags tumbling into the aisle. The cabin lights flickered and dimmed, emergency lighting activating briefly before the main system restored. A few rows ahead, a young boy about Sophie's age began to cry, his fear evident in his high-pitched wails. His mother, Maria Wilson, tried desperately to comfort him, but her own anxiety was palpable, feeding her son's distress. Sophie watched the boy with concern, momentarily distracted from her own fear. Dad, that boy is really scared. Michael nodded, recognizing an opportunity to help Sophie by allowing her to help someone else. His name is Ryan. I heard his mom earlier. Sometimes seeing someone else being brave can help us be brave too. The plane lurched again, and Vanessa Pearson let out an alarmed gasp, her earlier composure cracking. She gripped her husband's arm, perfectly manicured nails digging into expensive fabric. This is more than standard turbulence, James Thompson muttered, his business expertise extending to frequent flying. Something's off with the electrical systems. The cabin crew moved with increased urgency, their practiced smiles giving way to focused professionalism. Olivia Chen passed by their row again, her eyes briefly meeting Michael's with an unspoken question. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. Yes, something was wrong, and yes, he had noticed too. The screens flickered again, this time displaying garbled information before shutting down completely. Several passengers pulled out their phones only to find no signal available, unusual even for an aircraft in flight. Sophie, sensing the growing tension, turned to her father with wide eyes. "Dad, what's happening? Is the plane broken?" Michael chose his words carefully, balancing honesty with reassurance. "The plane is having some electronic issues, but modern aircraft have multiple backup systems. The pilots are very well trained for situations like this." Vanessa, overhearing this, turned to them with sudden anxiety replacing her earlier disdain. "How do you know that? Are you a pilot? Is this serious?" Before Michael could answer, Sophie's anxiety peaked. The cumulative stress of the flight, the turbulence, and the palpable tension in the cabin overwhelmed her coping mechanisms. She began to cry, not loudly but with the quiet devastation of a child trying desperately to be brave and falling short. "I want to go home," she sobbed. "I don't want to fly anymore. I'm sorry I'm not brave like Whiskers." The raw vulnerability in her voice cut through the cabin noise. Several passengers turned to look, their expressions a mix of sympathy and discomfort. Vanessa Pearson's patience snapped. "Excuse me," she called to a passing flight attendant, her voice carrying clearly through the cabin. "Is there any way to control that child? Some of us paid a premium for a peaceful flight experience." The flight attendant looked uncomfortable, caught between customer service and basic human decency. "Ma'am, I understand, but—" Michael stood up slowly, his movement deliberate and controlled. Though of average height, something in his posture seemed to fill the space around him. He turned to face Vanessa directly, his voice quiet but carrying a natural authority that made everyone within earshot fall silent. "My daughter," he said evenly, "is terrified of flying because 3 years ago, she watched her mother fall to her death while saving another child's life. She's 7 years old and fighting through trauma most adults couldn't handle. She's doing breathing exercises instead of screaming. She's counting ceiling panels instead of having a panic attack. She's being braver right now than most people ever have to be." The cabin fell silent. Even the ambient noise of the aircraft seemed to dim as passengers processed his words. "So yes," Michael continued, his eyes never leaving Vanessa's increasingly uncomfortable face. "She's crying quietly, and I would appreciate your patience while she works through her fear in the only way a 7-year-old knows how." He didn't wait for a response, but turned back to Sophie, kneeling in the aisle beside her seat. "You're doing great, sweetie. So brave. Just like Mom would be." Vanessa's face flushed deep red. James Thompson shifted uncomfortably beside her, suddenly very interested in the safety card in his seat pocket. The moment was broken by a sharp jolt of turbulence that sent Michael bracing himself against the seats. The overhead panels emitted a high-pitched electronic whine, and all cabin lights failed simultaneously, plunging them into darkness for several terrifying seconds before emergency lighting activated. The captain's voice came over the intercom again, noticeably more tense than before. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some electrical anomalies that our crew is addressing. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened. Cabin crew, please prepare for standard precautionary procedures." To most passengers, this sounded like routine reassurance. But to Michael, the specific phrasing was a coded alert, standard aviation protocol for a situation that was far more serious than the crew wanted to publicly acknowledge. In the dim emergency lighting, Sophie reached for her father's hand. "Are we going to be okay?" Michael squeezed her small fingers gently. "Yes, we are, I promise." And he meant it, not as blind reassurance, but as a commitment. Because what none of the passengers knew, what Michael himself had tried to forget for 3 years, was that before he was a grieving widower, before he was Sophie's devoted father, he had been Major Michael Nighthawk Carter, elite Air Force rescue pilot and flight instructor with 17 years of experience extracting people from impossible situations. As the plane shuddered around them, Olivia Chen made her way down the aisle, grabbing seatbacks for stability. Her eyes met Michael's again, but this time with a flash of genuine recognition. She leaned closer as she passed, her voice barely audible above the strained engines. "Seat 12F. Nighthawk?" Michael's face remained impassive, but a muscle tightened in his jaw. Confirmation enough. Olivia straightened, a new resolve in her posture. She moved with increased purpose toward the front of the aircraft, speaking urgently into her crew phone. The lights flickered back on, systems temporarily restored. Passengers exhaled in collective relief, but Michael knew better. The brief respite was just that, brief. Whatever was happening to this aircraft was serious, systemic, and, based on the pattern of failures, possibly deliberate. Ryan, the boy who had been crying, was now hiccuping quietly in his mother's arms a few rows ahead. Sophie watched him with concern, momentarily distracted from her own fear. "Dad," she whispered, "can I show Ryan how to hold Whiskers? It might help him not be scared." Michael smiled, pride temporarily overriding his concern about the aircraft. "That's very kind, Sophie. Let's wait until the seatbelt sign goes off, okay?" Kyle Parker, who had been filming earlier, now looked genuinely worried. He lowered his phone, his smirk replaced by concern, as the gravity of the situation began to dawn on him. His girlfriend beside him whispered something in his ear, her expression disapproving as she glanced at the screen showing Sophie's tear-streaked face. "What?" Kyle defended himself, though his voice lacked conviction. "It's just content. People love class contrast stuff." The plane lurched again, then stabilized. The electronic displays attempted to reboot, showing fragmented information before failing completely. Passengers murmured nervously, the earlier class distinctions forgotten in the face of shared uncertainty. An elderly man across the aisle clutched his chest, his breathing labored. His wife called out anxiously, "Is there a doctor on board? My husband has a heart condition." Without hesitation, Michael reached into his worn backpack and retrieved a small pill container. "Sir," he said, addressing the man calmly, "are you on nitroglycerin? Is this what you take?" He held up the medication for the man to see. The elderly passenger nodded weakly, surprise registering through his discomfort. Michael efficiently helped administer the medication, checking the man's pulse with practiced precision. "How did you—" "Lowry," the wife began. "Basic field medical training," Michael replied simply, not elaborating that this training had been part of his military rescue certification, the kind that prepared pilots to keep wounded soldiers alive until evacuation. This exchange wasn't lost on James Thompson, whose calculating gaze now followed Michael with increased interest. There was something about this supposed economy passenger that didn't add up. The medical knowledge, the calm under pressure, the bearing that seemed more military than civilian. The intercom crackled to life, but instead of the captain's voice, it was the first officer. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some technical difficulties with our primary navigation systems. As a precaution, we're diverting to the nearest suitable airport. Please remain calm and seated." "Diverting?" James Thompson muttered, reaching for his tablet to check their flight path. "We're over Colorado. There's nothing but mountains for the next 100 miles. Michael's mind raced through possibilities. Navigation system failures, electrical anomalies, communications issues. The pattern suggested either catastrophic system cascade failure or, more worryingly, an intentional attack on the aircraft's electronic systems. A sharp pain shot through James Thompson's left arm, causing him to wince visibly. He tried to mask it, but Michael noticed immediately. The slight pallor, the clenched jaw, the subtle adjustment of posture to ease pressure on the chest. Classic signs of cardiac distress. Not critical yet, but concerning. Michael made a mental note to keep an eye on Thompson. Heart attacks at altitude were complicated by reduced oxygen and limited medical resources. Olivia returned, this time with Amanda Taylor, the chief flight attendant. Their eyes went straight to Michael, their expressions a mix of recognition and desperate hope. "Sir," Amanda said quietly, leaning close to Michael's seat, "the captain would like to speak with you. Urgently." Vanessa Pearson, still smarting from the earlier exchange, couldn't resist commenting. Why would the captain want to speak to him? Because his daughter's crying? Amanda didn't bother addressing Vanessa directly. Her focus remained entirely on Michael, her voice low but clear. "Sir, we have a situation developing. Your expertise would be invaluable." The careful phrasing confirmed Michael's suspicions. They knew who he was, or at least who he had been. The question was how and why it mattered now. Michael turned to Sophie, whose eyes had grown wide with uncertainty. Sweetie, I need to go help the pilots for a few minutes. Can you be my brave girl and stay right here? Sophie clutched Whiskers tighter, fear evident in her face, but she nodded. Like when you fix the broken planes at work? Something like that, Michael said, managing a reassuring smile. I won't be long. As he stood, Sophie called after him, her voice small but determined. Dad, can I let Ryan hold Whiskers while you're gone, so he won't be scared? Michael felt a surge of pride cut through his concern. Even in her fear, his daughter was thinking of others, Rebecca's legacy living on in their child. That's a wonderful idea, Sophie. Mrs. Wilson might need to come to you, though, since we need to keep our seatbelts on. Maria Wilson, hearing her name, looked over with confusion that quickly transformed to grateful understanding when Michael explained Sophie's offer. With the flight attendant's help, she and Ryan carefully made their way to the empty seat beside Sophie, the simple act of kindness creating a small island of comfort amidst the growing tension. As Michael followed Amanda toward the cockpit, he was acutely aware of the eyes tracking his movement. James Thompson watched with narrowed eyes, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by calculated interest. Vanessa's expression had shifted from disdain to confusion. Kyle Parker had raised his phone again, filming this unexpected development. Michael paused briefly by an unoccupied row where a man in a nondescript suit sat alone, apparently absorbed in his tablet. The gentleman in 14C is exhibiting early signs of cardiac distress, Michael said quietly to Amanda. Might want to keep an eye on him. The suited man glanced up sharply at this, assessing Michael with new interest. Jason Harris, air marshal assigned to this flight, hadn't expected his cover to be penetrated so easily, especially not by a civilian passenger. Unless, of course, this passenger wasn't what he appeared to be. The plane shuddered, dropping suddenly before stabilizing. Passengers gasped. Someone screamed. Michael's hand automatically reached for the overhead bins, his balance perfect despite the turbulence. The unconscious movement of someone who had spent thousands of hours in aircraft under far worse conditions. Amanda used her key to unlock the cockpit door, ushering Michael inside with an urgency that confirmed his worst suspicions. The door sealed behind them with a soft hiss. Captain David Russell turned immediately, recognition flooding his face. Nighthawk, my God, it is you. When Chen said she thought she recognized you. Michael cut him off, his focus already on the instrument panels, noting the cascading warnings and system failures. What are we dealing with, Captain? Russell, a veteran pilot in his 50s, gestured to the screens. Started about 20 minutes ago. Systems failing sequentially, first communications, then navigation, now electrical. Nothing follows standard failure patterns. It's like the aircraft is being systematically attacked, Michael finished grimly, scanning the emergency procedures the co-pilot was frantically working through. This isn't random failure. This is coordinated electronic warfare. Russell nodded, confirmation rather than surprise. Air traffic control's last transmission before we lost contact warned that several aircraft have experienced similar issues in the last hour. They suspect some kind of coordinated cyber attack targeting commercial aviation. The implications were staggering. Michael leaned in, examining the navigation display that flickered between normal operation and complete failure. You're flying blind? Instruments are unreliable. We're on backup systems, but they're degrading too. And we just received a partial emergency transmission suggesting this isn't random. They're targeting flights with specific passengers. Michael's mind raced. Who's the target on this flight? Russell met his eyes steadily. The transmission cut out, but it mentioned former military personnel, high-ranking officers with specialized training. The realization hit Michael like a physical blow. They're targeting me. We don't know that for certain, the co-pilot interjected. But your name was flagged in an emergency security protocol just before our systems went dark. Michael's thoughts immediately went to Sophie, alone in the cabin. If he was the target, then everyone on this plane, including his daughter, was in danger because of him. The aircraft shuddered again, more violently this time. Warning lights cascaded across the panels. Primary electrical system failure, the co-pilot announced, his voice tense but controlled. Switching to backup power. How long until we can land? Michael asked, already calculating scenarios, escape routes, survival possibilities. Nearest emergency airfield is Peterson Air Force Base, Russell replied. 30 minutes in optimal conditions. With these systems, maybe 45, if we can maintain altitude and heading. Michael nodded, his mind shifting fully into the operational mode he'd set aside 3 years ago. I need to speak to the passengers. Prepare them. And I need your most technically proficient crew member to help me identify if there's a device on board that could be facilitating this attack. Russell hesitated only briefly before nodding. Do whatever you need to do, Nighthawk. This is your arena now. I also need to know if there's anyone else on board who might be a resource. Military, law enforcement, engineers. Russell exchanged glances with his co-pilot. The manifest shows a Frank Cooper in 22A, aerospace engineer with Boeing, and the air marshal is Jason Harris, seated in 14C. Michael raised an eyebrow. Harris is good. I spotted him earlier. You spotted an air marshal? The co-pilot sounded impressed. Old habits, Michael replied simply. What about Thompson in first class? James Thompson? Russell nodded grimly. CEO of Thompson Defense Technologies, specializes in automated defense systems and drone technology. His company just won a major Pentagon contract, beating out several traditional contractors. Michael's expression darkened. I know. I consulted on that project before I left the service. His AI flight systems prioritize efficiency over human decision-making. I oppose the contract. You think he's connected to this? Michael considered carefully. Unlikely as a perpetrator, possible as a target. Either way, his technical knowledge could be valuable. The plane dropped suddenly, causing all 3 men to brace themselves against the controls. Outside the cockpit windows, dark storm clouds loomed ahead, a literal tempest to match the figurative one brewing inside the aircraft. One more thing, Michael said as he prepared to return to the cabin. My daughter, Sophie, she stays with me. If I'm the target, I need her where I can protect her. As the cockpit door opened, Michael stepped back into a cabin transformed by fear and uncertainty. The professional calm he had cultivated through years of high-stress missions settled over him like armor. He was no longer just Michael Carter, single father and maintenance engineer. For the first time in 3 years, he was Nighthawk again. And everyone on this plane, especially the little girl with the stuffed rabbit, was now his responsibility. Michael returned to the cabin with measured steps, his posture radiating a calm authority that hadn't been evident before. Passengers watched him with renewed interest, their earlier judgment replaced by uncertain curiosity. The emergency lighting cast strange shadows across faces now united by shared fear. Sophie looked up, relief flooding her features when she spotted her father. She sat with Ryan beside her, both children clutching Whiskers between them like a talisman. Maria Wilson gave Michael a grateful nod as he approached. Thank you, she whispered. Your daughter is remarkable. She's been telling Ryan about Whiskers' adventures as a brave pilot rabbit. Michael smiled, but his eyes were already scanning the cabin, assessing. Sophie has her mother's heart, he said simply. The plane lurched again, more violently this time. A woman screamed somewhere in the back. Michael placed a reassuring hand on Sophie's shoulder, steadying her physically and emotionally. Dad, are you fixing the plane? Sophie asked, her voice small but steady. Working on it, sweetheart. He knelt beside her seat, speaking quietly. I need you to be my special helper. Can you do that? Sophie nodded solemnly, proud to be entrusted with a mission. I need you and Ryan to be in charge of keeping Whiskers safe and helping other kids stay calm. Can you tell them Whiskers' brave stories? Sophie's eyes widened with purpose. Like Operation Helpers? Exactly like that. Michael smiled, recalling how Sophie had once overheard him discussing rescue operations and had played Operation Helpers with her stuffed animals for weeks after. As Michael stood, Olivia Chen approached with Frank Cooper, a serious-looking man in his early 40s, with the unmistakable precision of an engineer in his movements. Mr. Cooper has offered his assistance, Olivia Sewell said quietly. Frank extended his hand. Boeing Systems Engineer. Captain says you might need technical support. Michael nodded, grateful for the expertise. We need to identify if there's a device on board that could be facilitating this attack. Across the aisle, Kyle Parker was still filming, but his expression had changed from mockery to intense focus. His girlfriend leaned over, whispering urgently, "Kyle, stop recording. This is serious." "That's why I'm documenting it," Kyle responded, though his voice lacked its earlier flippancy. "Something big is happening here." James Thompson watched this exchange with calculating eyes, his earlier dismissiveness giving way to growing suspicion. He massaged his left arm subtly, the discomfort in his chest a persistent distraction. Vanessa noticed his discomfort, her perfectly manicured hand resting on his arm with unusual tenderness. "James, are you all right?" "Fine," he replied curtly, his attention fixed on Michael. "But our mechanic friend isn't what he seems." Michael approached Jason Harris, the air marshal, with deliberate casualness. Their exchange looked like ordinary passenger conversation to untrained eyes, but they were rapidly establishing a security protocol. "Assessment?" Michael asked under his breath. "2 exits, 148 souls on board, 6 minutes of oxygen if cabin pressure fails," Harris replied smoothly. "You're Nighthawk, aren't you?" "Iraq, 2018, the Sandstorm extraction." Michael gave an almost imperceptible nod. "We need to coordinate. Captain believes this aircraft is being targeted specifically because I'm on board." Harris's expression remained neutral, but his posture shifted subtly. "What's your approach?" "Divide and secure. I need you monitoring the cabin while Cooper and I check for devices. Chen will liaison with the cockpit." The plane shuddered again, dropping altitude suddenly before stabilizing. The lights flickered, and the temperature dropped noticeably as the environmental system struggled. "Dad!" Sophie called out, her voice rising in fear. Michael was at her side instantly, steady as a rock. "It's okay, Sophie. Remember how we talked about air pockets? Just like bumps on a road." Vanessa Pearson, watching this interaction, felt something shift inside her. The tenderness between father and daughter pierced through her practiced disdain, awakening memories of her own father, a man who had worked with his hands, who had sacrificed endlessly for her education, whom she had gradually distanced herself from as she climbed social ladders. Michael turned to address the cabin, his voice carrying natural authority without shouting. "Ladies and gentlemen, I know you're concerned. The captain is dealing with some electrical issues that are affecting our navigation systems. We're diverting to the nearest airfield as a precaution." "Who exactly are you?" James Thompson called out, his tone challenging. "You're clearly not just another passenger." A tense silence fell over the cabin. Michael held Thompson's gaze steadily. "My name is Michael Carter. I'm an aircraft maintenance engineer." "Bullshit," Thompson replied, wincing slightly at another twinge in his chest. "Engineers don't get called to the cockpit during emergencies, and they don't coordinate with air marshals." He nodded toward Harris, whose cover had been professionally maintained until Thompson's accusation exposed him. The revelation sent ripples of murmurs through the cabin. Michael realized transparency might be his best approach. "Before I was an engineer, I flew planes. I'm helping the crew navigate our current situation." "What kind of planes?" Thompson pressed, his business instincts sensing there was more to the story. Before Michael could answer, the cabin plunged into darkness as all electrical systems failed simultaneously. Emergency lights flickered on seconds later, bathing everyone in an eerie blue glow. Oxygen masks dropped from overhead compartments, dangling like ghostly appendages. "Do not use the masks," Michael commanded sharply. "This is an electrical failure, not depressurization. Mask down means the system is malfunctioning." His authoritative tone cut through the rising panic. Passengers who had been reaching for masks stopped, looking to him for guidance instead of succumbing to fear. "Frank, check the rear systems panel," Michael directed. "Olivia, I need the emergency kit from the galley. Harris, secure the cabin." The three moved with purpose, while Michael turned to Sophie. "I need to help more people now, sweetheart. Can you and Ryan keep being brave?" Sophie nodded, her small face serious. "Whiskers and I will take care of everyone, Dad." As Michael moved toward the front of the aircraft with Olivia, James Thompson intercepted him, his imposing frame blocking the narrow aisle. "I know who you are," Thompson said quietly, his voice carrying just enough for those nearby to hear. "You're Nighthawk, the pilot who tanked my Icarus project 3 years ago." Michael's expression remained impassive, but his eyes hardened. "The pilot who recommended against replacing human judgment with AI in combat situations." Yes, their gazes locked in silent battle, years of professional antagonism crystallizing in this moment of crisis. Thompson had been pushing for fully automated flight systems, aircraft that could fly, fight, and make life or death decisions without human pilots. Michael had led the opposition, arguing that removing human moral judgment from warfare was both technically flawed and ethically bankrupt. Your opposition cost my company millions, Thompson said, his voice tight. Your system would have cost lives, Michael countered evenly. Vanessa watched this exchange with growing confusion, pieces of her husband's work suddenly connecting to this mysterious man in economy clothing. The standoff was interrupted by Frank Cooper's urgent call from the rear of the aircraft. Carter, you need to see this. Michael brushed past Thompson, moving quickly to where Cooper was examining an access panel near the rear lavatory. Found this hardwired into the communications array, Cooper said quietly, pointing to a small device with blinking lights. It's not standard equipment, and it's definitely not Boeing. Michael examined the device without touching it. Signal interceptor and broadcaster, military grade but modified. It's piggybacking on the aircraft's systems, injecting corrupted data. Cooper nodded grimly. Can we remove it? Not without potentially triggering a failsafe. We need to isolate it first. As they discussed technical options, Sophie had organized the children in nearby rows into a brave rabbit club, with Whiskers as their mascot. She moved between them with remarkable composure for a 7-year-old, offering comfort through shared courage. My dad says being brave isn't about not being scared, she told a teary-eyed little boy. It's about doing what you need to do, even when you are scared. Kyle Parker had abandoned his social media performance entirely, his camera now documenting Sophie's extraordinary grace under pressure. His girlfriend watched with growing respect, both for the child and for the father who had raised her with such remarkable resilience. The plane jolted violently, throwing several standing passengers to the floor. Michael maintained his balance with the unconscious skill of someone who had weathered far worse turbulence in military aircraft. System failure cascade, he muttered to Cooper. We're losing control surfaces. In the cockpit, Captain Russell fought the increasingly unresponsive controls, his decades of experience tested to their limits. The co-pilot worked feverishly through emergency checklists that never anticipated this kind of technological warfare. Michael made his way back to Sophie, checking that she was securely belted in. You're doing amazing, sweetheart, he told her, genuine pride in his voice. Dad, Sophie whispered, is this like when Mommy had her accident? Are we going to fall? The question pierced Michael's heart. For a moment, the composed rescue pilot gave way to the father who had held his daughter through countless nights of terror after Rebecca's death. No, sweetheart, he said firmly. This is different. We have good pilots, and I'm helping them. We're going to be okay. Promise? Her small voice carried the weight of all her childhood trust. I promise. And in that moment, Michael knew he would move heaven and earth to keep that promise, just as he had moved mountains to rebuild their life after Rebecca's death. The memory of those dark days washed over him. The funeral in the rain, Sophie's tiny hand in his, the night she woke screaming, convinced she was falling. His resignation from the Air Force despite 17 years of distinguished service, the modest apartment they moved to, the maintenance job that allowed him flexible hours to be there for every school pickup, every nightmare, every small triumph in Sophie's recovery. His reverie was broken by Olivia Chen's urgent approach. Major Carter, she said quietly, using his former rank, the captain needs you again. As Michael rose, Sophie caught his sleeve. Dad, you were a major? Like in the Army? Michael hesitated, then nodded. Air Force, sweetie. A long time ago, before you were born. Is that why you know how to fix planes? Part of the reason. He smoothed her hair gently. I'll explain everything later. As Michael followed Olivia toward the cockpit, he passed Thompson and Vanessa again. This time, Thompson's face was alarmingly pale, his breathing labored, one hand pressed against his chest. Mr. Thompson needs medical attention, Michael said to Olivia. Possible cardiac event. Vanessa's perfectly composed facade cracked instantly. James, what's wrong? Nothing, Thompson insisted, though the pain was evident in his voice. Just indigestion. Michael knelt beside Thompson, professional assessment overriding their personal antagonism. How long have you had chest pain? Any radiation to the jaw or left arm? Thompson glared but answered through gritted teeth. Started about 20 minutes ago. Left arm feels heavy. Michael turned to Olivia. We need the AED and emergency medical kit and page for any medical professionals on board. As Olivia hurried away, Michael addressed Vanessa. Mrs. Thompson, I need you to help your husband take an aspirin. Do you have any in your purse? Vanessa fumbled with her designer handbag, hands shaking. I don't think so. James, where are your pills? Briefcase, Thompson managed, his corporate arrogance diminished by physical vulnerability. A woman approached from several rows back. Dr. Jennifer Blake, a cardiologist who had been sleeping through the initial commotion. I'm a doctor, she announced, kneeling beside Thompson. What are his symptoms? Michael briefed her efficiently, his description so clinically precise that Dr. Blake gave him a surprised look. Military medical training, he explained briefly. While Dr. Blake examined Thompson, Michael continued to the cockpit, his mind racing. Thompson's condition complicated an already dangerous situation. If they needed to attempt an emergency landing or evacuation, a passenger in cardiac distress would be at extreme risk. In the cockpit, Captain Russell looked up with evident relief as Michael entered. Systems degrading faster than anticipated. We've lost primary and secondary navigation. Flying on basic instrumentation and visual reference now. Michael studied the controls, his experienced eye instantly assessing the severity of their situation. Weather ahead? Storm system moving in from the west. We can try to divert south, but without reliable navigation. We'd risk flying in circles. Michael finished grimly. What about communication? Intermittent at best. We manage one partial transmission to Denver Center before losing contact again. Michael considered their options. We need to attempt an emergency squawk on multiple frequencies. Military bands too. We're close enough to Peterson that they might pick us up. The co-pilot looked doubtful. With compromised communication systems? It's worth trying, Michael insisted. Meanwhile, we need to prepare for worst-case scenarios. How much fuel do we have? About 90 minutes at current consumption rates. Michael nodded, formulating a plan. If we can't establish reliable communications or navigation, we'll need to attempt a visual approach to the nearest suitable airfield. I know this region. There's a regional airport near Colorado Springs that could work. As they discussed technical details, Michael's thoughts kept returning to Sophie, sitting bravely in the cabin. Everything he did now was for her. Every decision, every calculated risk. The thought of her experiencing another loss was unbearable. Back in the cabin, Dr. Blake had stabilized Thompson with emergency medication from the plane's medical kit. Vanessa sat beside him, her perfectly manicured hand gripping his, designer bracelets jangling with every nervous movement. Will he be all right? She asked Dr. Blake, her voice stripped of its earlier condescension. He's stable for now, but he needs a hospital, Dr. Blake replied honestly. The sooner we land, the better. Kyle Parker had shifted his filming focus, documenting the unfolding drama with unexpected sensitivity. His girlfriend watched Sophie, who was still moving between frightened children, offering whiskers for comfort to each in turn. That kid is incredible, she murmured to Kyle, and we were making fun of them earlier. Kyle nodded, genuine shame crossing his features. I'm deleting those first clips. This isn't content, this is real life. Frank Cooper had been working with Jason Harris to isolate the mysterious device without triggering potential failsafes. Their hushed technical discussion was interrupted when Michael returned from the cockpit, his expression grave. What's our status? Harris asked quietly. Critical but manageable, Michael replied. We're working on emergency communication protocols while attempting to maintain a viable flight path to the nearest airfield. Thompson's condition complicates matters. Cooper nodded toward the device they'd discovered. We've isolated the power source, but disconnecting it could trigger a system-wide failure. Or it could restore normal operations, Michael countered. It's a calculated risk we may need to take, but not yet. First, I need to prepare the passengers. Michael moved to the center of the cabin, his presence commanding attention without him having to ask for it. Passengers fell silent, their faces turned toward him like flowers seeking sunlight in a storm. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice steady and confident. We're experiencing a significant electrical malfunction that's affecting our navigation and communication systems. The captain and crew are working to resolve these issues, but I want to be transparent with you about our situation. The honesty was risky, but Michael knew from experience that in crisis situations, treating people with respect by sharing information often prevented panic more effectively than false reassurances. We're currently diverting to the nearest suitable airport. As a precaution, I'd like everyone to review the safety card in your seat pocket and locate your nearest exits. A nervous murmur rippled through the cabin, but there was no panic. Michael's calm authority seemed to transfer to the passengers themselves. Additionally, we have a passenger requiring medical attention. If anyone has medical training who hasn't already identified themselves, please alert a flight attendant. As Michael continued briefing the passengers, Olivia Chen approached Sophie, kneeling beside her seat. "Your dad is very special, isn't he?" she said quietly. Sophie nodded solemnly. "He fixes broken planes at work, and he fixes broken hearts at home." The simple statement brought unexpected tears to Olivia's eyes. "He saved my life once," she confided. "A long time ago in a place far away from here." Sophie's eyes widened. "Really? Like a superhero?" "Something like that," Olivia smiled. "I was a military nurse before I became a flight attendant. Your dad flew into a very dangerous place to rescue me and other people when our helicopter crashed." This revelation transfixed Sophie. "Dad never told me he was a hero." "The real heroes rarely talk about it," Olivia replied softly. Their conversation was interrupted by another violent lurch of the aircraft. This time the drop was sustained, the engines screaming as the pilots fought for control. Oxygen masks dropped again, but this time it wasn't a malfunction. "Cabin pressure dropping," Amanda Taylor announced, her professional calm remarkable under the circumstances. "Everyone use your oxygen masks now." Michael was beside Sophie in an instant, securing her mask before donning his own. Around them, passengers fumbled with masks, some panicking, others helping those nearby. Through the window, Sophie could see one of the engines sputtering, blue flames occasionally visible around the cowling. Her eyes widened in terror above her mask. "It's okay," Michael reassured her, his voice muffled. "The plane can fly perfectly well on one engine." The aircraft stabilized at a lower altitude, where cabin pressure could be maintained without supplemental oxygen. Masks were removed, revealing faces etched with fear, but also growing resolve. James Thompson, looking alarmingly gray despite Dr. Blake's interventions, gestured for Michael to approach. "Nighthawk," he said weakly, "we need to talk." Michael knelt beside Thompson's seat, professional concern overriding their earlier antagonism. "This isn't coincidence," Thompson whispered, his voice strained. "The device your engineer found, it's military prototype technology from my company." Michael's expression hardened. "You're saying your company is responsible for this attack?" "No," Thompson shook his head weakly. "I'm saying someone with access to our proprietary technology is, and they're targeting me, or you, or both of us." The implications were staggering. Why would someone target both of us? Thompson's eyes met Michael's with unexpected directness. "Because 3 years ago, you weren't just opposing my Icarus project. You were investigating security breaches within it. Breaches that pointed to an insider selling our tech to foreign interests." A memory clicked into place for Michael, a classified appendix to his report, documenting suspicious data transfers that had been flagged as potential espionage. The investigation was shut down, Michael recalled, pieces falling into place. "Your company filed a complaint claiming military overreach into proprietary systems." Thompson nodded grimly. "I filed that complaint because I was told the investigation was a competitive intelligence operation aimed at stealing our technology. I never saw your actual findings. And now someone with access to your technology is using it against us," Michael concluded, the full picture becoming clearer. "Who had that level of access?" Thompson's breathing was becoming more labored, but he forced himself to continue. "Only 5 people. Me, my chief engineer, our head of security, our military liaison, and, Michael pressed. "Thomas Reynolds," Thompson whispered, "former Air Force cyber warfare specialist. He joined us after leaving the service 3 years ago. Said he was pushed out by an overzealous superior with a vendetta against next-gen technology. Michael's blood ran cold. Reynolds was under my command. I reported him for ethical violations, attempting to remove safety protocols from autonomous systems. He was discharged, not pushed out. Their eyes met in mutual understanding. Reynolds had a motive targeting both of them: revenge against Michael for ending his military career, and against Thompson for the company that had hired him, but perhaps hadn't valued him as he believed he deserved. "Is Reynolds on this flight?" Michael asked urgently. Thompson shook his head. "No, but he had access to the passenger manifest system. He would have known we were both boarded." This revelation changed everything. Michael needed to get this information to the cockpit immediately, but as he rose, the aircraft gave another sickening lurch. The lights failed completely, plunging the cabin into darkness except for the emergency floor lighting. In that moment of darkness, Michael felt Sophie's small hand find his, squeezing with complete trust. The simple touch grounded him, reminding him of what was truly at stake. When emergency lighting finally flickered on, Michael saw that Sophie had unbuckled and moved to comfort a sobbing woman across the aisle, offering whiskers with solemn dignity. "He helps with scary things," Sophie explained to the frightened passenger. "You can borrow him for a little while." The woman accepted the worn rabbit with trembling hands, managing a watery smile. "Thank you, sweetheart." Michael felt his chest tighten with an emotion beyond pride. In the midst of danger, his 7-year-old daughter was displaying the kind of courage and compassion that defined true heroism. As Olivia Chen approached with urgent news from the cockpit, Michael knew they were facing the most critical phase of their emergency yet. But watching Sophie, Rebecca's daughter, his greatest joy, he also knew with absolute certainty that giving up was not an option. Whatever it took, he would get these people safely on the ground. He would keep his promise to Sophie. He would honor Rebecca's memory by ensuring their daughter had the future she deserved. With renewed determination, Michael turned to face the next challenge in their fight for survival. The emergency lighting cast an eerie blue glow throughout the cabin as Michael made his way back to the cockpit, the revelation about Thomas Reynolds weighing heavily on his mind. This wasn't just a technical malfunction. It was a deliberate attack orchestrated by someone who knew both him and Thompson, someone with a personal vendetta and the technical expertise to execute it. Captain Russell looked up as Michael entered, hope and exhaustion battling in his weathered features. "Tell me you have good news, Nighthawk." "Mixed," Michael replied, closing the door behind him. "We've identified a device interfering with our systems, likely military-grade tech stolen from Thompson's company, and we have a prime suspect, Thomas Reynolds." The co-pilot's head snapped up. "Reynolds? The cyber warfare specialist?" Michael nodded grimly. "The same. He worked under my command until I reported him for ethical violations 3 years ago. After his discharge, he joined Thompson's company. And now he's using their own technology against them," Russell concluded, the pieces falling into place. "Can we neutralize the device?" "Cooper's working on it, but there's significant risk. If the device has fail-safes, removing it could trigger a complete system shutdown." The aircraft shuddered, dropping several hundred feet before the pilots could stabilize it. Warning lights cascaded across the instrument panel in a symphony of impending disaster. "We're losing hydraulic pressure," the co-pilot announced, fighting to maintain control. "Backup systems engaged, but they're degrading rapidly." Michael studied the navigation display, which flickered between static and fragmented information. "What's our current position?" Russell gestured to the old-fashioned paper map spread across his lap, a backup few modern pilots still carried. "Best estimate puts us here, about 40 miles northeast of Colorado Springs. Weather's closing in from the west. We need to make our approach soon or risk flying blind into the mountains." "Any luck with communications?" "Intermittent at best. We managed to transmit a partial emergency squawk, but no confirmation of reception." Michael considered their options, each calculation weighted with the lives of everyone on board, especially Sophie. "We need to attempt contact with Peterson Air Force Base on military frequencies. They'll have the equipment to guide us in even through electronic interference." As Russell adjusted the radio to military channels, Michael returned to the cabin where Frank Cooper waited with news about the mysterious device. "It's sophisticated," Cooper explained quietly, leading Michael to the rear galley where they could speak privately. Definitely designed by someone with both military and aviation expertise. It's integrated with the aircraft's main communication bus in a way that makes simple removal dangerous. Can you isolate it? Cooper shook his head. Not completely, but I think I can create a buffer that might minimize its influence. Give us back partial systems control. Do it, Michael decided. And I need you to check Thompson's luggage. Reynolds might have planted a secondary device specifically targeting him. As Cooper moved to implement their plan, Michael approached Jason Harris, who was methodically checking the cabin, maintaining order with quiet authority. Status? Michael asked under his breath. Passengers are holding together, but we're on a knife's edge, Harris replied. Thompson's condition is deteriorating despite the doctor's efforts, and we have several others showing signs of severe anxiety. The good news is your daughter has somehow managed to create a calm zone among the children. Michael glanced towards Sophie, who had organized a small group of children into what appeared to be a storytelling circle. She sat in the center, Whiskers temporarily returned to her lap, gesturing animatedly as she spoke. Despite the crisis unfolding around them, the children were engaged, their fear momentarily forgotten. Pride swelled in Michael's chest, tempered by the urgent reality of their situation. I need to address the passengers again. They deserve to know what we're facing. Harris nodded in agreement. Honesty might be our best tool against panic at this point. Michael moved to the center of the cabin, his presence immediately drawing attention. Passengers fell silent, faces turned toward him with expressions ranging from hope to fear to budding trust. Ladies and gentlemen, so he began, his voice steady and authoritative without being alarming. I want to update you on our situation. We've identified the source of our electrical issues and are working to resolve them. In the meantime, we're diverting to Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs, where emergency personnel will be standing by. He paused, deciding how much to reveal. Transparency was important, but causing unnecessary panic would only make their situation more dangerous. As a precaution, I'd like everyone to prepare for a potential emergency landing. Please remove any sharp objects from your pockets, loosen ties and collars, and review the brace position demonstrated by our flight attendants. The cabin crew moved through the aisles, demonstrating the proper brace position with professional calm. Michael noted Olivia Chen's expertise as she worked with passengers, her military medical training evident in how she prioritized those who might need extra assistance. Is it bad, Dad? Sophie asked as Michael returned to her side. Are we going to crash? Michael knelt beside her seat, meeting her eyes with steady reassurance. No, sweetheart. The plane is having problems, but the pilots are very skilled. We're being extra careful, that's all. Sophie studied his face with the piercing perception children sometimes possess. You're not telling me everything. Michael smiled gently. You're right, I'm not telling you everything because some of it is complicated and might sound scary. But I am telling you the truth. We're having problems, we're working to fix them, and I'm doing everything I can to keep us safe. This seemed to satisfy her. Like when you fix the broken planes at work? Exactly like that. Sophie's small hand found his, squeezing with complete trust. Whiskers says you're the best plane fixer in the world. Michael swallowed the lump in his throat. Well, we can't disappoint Whiskers, can we? As he stood, Michael caught Vanessa Pearson watching this exchange, her earlier disdain replaced by something more complex. She sat beside James Thompson, whose condition appeared to be stabilizing under Dr. Blake's care, though his color remained alarmingly gray. Your daughter is remarkable, Vanessa said as Michael passed. She's been helping calm the other children, telling them stories about her rabbit's adventures. Michael nodded, surprised by the genuine warmth in her voice. She gets that from her mother. What happened to her mother, if you don't mind my asking? Michael hesitated, memories of Rebecca surfacing like a physical ache. She died saving a child who had climbed onto our apartment balcony railing. Sophie saw it happen. Vanessa's perfectly made-up face crumpled slightly. I'm so sorry. And I'm sorry for how I behaved earlier. It was inexcusable. We all show different faces under stress, Michael replied simply. How's your husband? Stable for now, but Dr. Blake says he needs a hospital as soon as possible. Vanessa glanced at Thompson, genuine concern in her eyes. He can be difficult, but he's not a bad man, just driven. Most of us are more complicated than we appear at first glance, Michael acknowledged, thinking of his own journey from decorated military pilot to single father working maintenance shifts. Their conversation was interrupted by a violent lurch of the aircraft that sent Michael grabbing for the nearest handhold. The cabin lights failed completely for several seconds before emergency systems engaged again. "Cooper!" Michael called out, making his way toward the rear where the engineer was working on the mysterious device. Frank Cooper looked up, his expression grim. "It's fighting back. I created a buffer to isolate it from critical systems, but it's adaptive, almost like it has preset responses to counteract tampering." "Artificial intelligence?" Cooper nodded. "Rudimentary but effective. This is cutting-edge stuff, definitely military grade." Michael's mind raced. If Reynolds had programmed the device with adaptive countermeasures, their options for disabling it were severely limited. "Keep trying to isolate it," Michael instructed. "I need to check on something in the cockpit." As Michael made his way forward, the aircraft suddenly banked sharply to the right, sending unsecured items tumbling across the cabin. Passengers cried out in alarm, and several oxygen masks dropped from their compartments. In the cockpit, Captain Russell was fighting the controls, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool cabin temperature. "We've lost primary hydraulics completely," he reported as Michael entered. "Flying on backups only, and they're degrading." The co-pilot was attempting to establish communications, switching between frequencies with increasing desperation. Still no response from air traffic control or Peterson. Michael leaned over the radio equipment, his trained eye spotting anomalies in the signal strength indicators. "The device isn't just affecting our navigation, it's actively jamming our communications. We need to try different approaches." He adjusted several settings, configuring the equipment to transmit on frequencies typically reserved for military emergency protocols. This might cut through the interference. As Michael worked, he felt the aircraft beginning a gradual descent. Outside the cockpit windows, dark storm clouds loomed ahead, their menacing forms obscuring any view of the terrain below. "Time to landing?" Michael asked tersely. 25 minutes if we maintain current descent rate and heading," Russell replied, "but we're flying increasingly blind. Without reliable instruments or ground contact." The unspoken conclusion hung in the air. They were in severe danger of flying into mountainous terrain with minimal visibility and compromised controls. Michael made a decision. Continue current heading for 5 more minutes, then execute a standard right-hand pattern that would position us for a southeast approach to Peterson. Their main runway is oriented northwest-southeast, which should keep us clear of the highest terrain. Russell nodded, trusting Michael's knowledge of the area. "And if we can't establish contact by then, we'll have to attempt a visual approach if weather permits. If not..." Michael didn't finish the sentence. Both men understood the alternatives were increasingly limited. The radio suddenly crackled to life, a fragmented transmission breaking through the interference. "Aircraft transmitting emergency. Identify yourself, position, and heading." Michael grabbed the microphone. "This is Commercial Flight 2937, declaring emergency. Multiple systems failures, possible cyber attack. Request immediate guidance to Peterson Air Force Base." Static filled the channel then. "Commercial 2937, this is Peterson approach. Stand by for emergency protocol Alpha 7. Relief flooded through the cockpit. Alpha 7 was a military protocol for guiding compromised aircraft to safe landing. It meant Peterson was mobilizing their emergency response teams and preparing for their arrival. "We have contact," Michael announced, hope threading through his voice for the first time since the crisis began. "They're implementing Alpha 7. As Michael exited the cockpit to update the passengers, he found the cabin in a state of controlled tension. Olivia Chen and Amanda Taylor were efficiently preparing for potential emergency landing, securing loose items and instructing passengers on proper procedures. Sophie looked up as he approached, relief washing over her small face. "Dad, you fixed it?" Michael knelt beside her seat. "Not completely, sweetheart, but we made progress. We've made contact with the Air Force Base where we're going to land." "Like where you used to work?" "Similar," Michael smiled. "They have special equipment to help planes that are having problems." As Michael spoke with Sophie, Frank Cooper approached urgently, his expression tense. "Carter, I found something in Thompson's carry-on. You need to see this." Michael followed Cooper to where Thompson's briefcase had been secured. Inside, nestled among business documents, was a small electronic device similar to the one they'd found interfaced with the aircraft's systems. It was designed to look like a standard power bank, Cooper explained quietly, but it's actually a sophisticated transponder. It's been transmitting Thompson's location continuously. The implications were clear. Reynolds hadn't just targeted the aircraft, he had specifically targeted Thompson, using the executive's own device to track him. Does it pose any immediate danger to the aircraft? Michael asked. Cooper shook his head. It's passive, just transmitting location data. But it confirms our theory. This attack was personally motivated and specifically targeted. Michael nodded grimly. Secure it and make sure it stays powered. It might provide evidence later. As Cooper moved away, Michael noticed James Thompson watching him with glazed but intelligent eyes. Despite his medical distress, the executive was tracking everything happening around him. You found it, Thompson stated weakly as Michael approached. Your personal tracker. Reynolds planted it in your briefcase. Thompson closed his eyes briefly, pain crossing his features that seemed more emotional than physical. He was my protege. I trusted him with everything. Why would he target you specifically? Michael pressed. Revenge against me makes sense. I ended his military career, but you gave him a second chance. Thompson's laugh was bitter and strained. Because 3 months ago, I discovered irregularities in our security protocols. Foreign entities accessing prototype data. I launched an internal investigation without telling anyone, including Reynolds. Understanding dawned. You suspected him of selling your technology. I had no proof, just suspicions, but apparently it was enough to make him act. Thompson winced as another wave of pain hit him. The cruel irony is I was flying to meet with federal investigators today. I have evidence encrypted in my company server, accessible only with my personal authentication codes. The aircraft lurched again, more violently this time. Overhead bins popped open, an oxygen mask dropped throughout the cabin. The lights flickered ominously. Ladies and gentlemen, Amanda Taylor's voice came over the intercom, steady despite the crisis. Please secure your oxygen masks and prepare for possible decompression. Michael moved quickly to help Sophie with her mask, ensuring it was properly sealed before securing his own. Around them, passengers followed instructions with the growing coordination of people who had accepted their situation and were now focused on survival. Through the window, Michael could see they had entered the edge of the storm system. Rain lashed against the fuselage, and occasional flashes of lightning illuminated the dark clouds surrounding them. The intercom crackled again, this time with Captain Russell's voice. This is your captain speaking. We're beginning our final approach to Peterson Air Force Base. We've established contact with their emergency services, who will be guiding us in. Please remain in your seats with seatbelts securely fastened. Michael knew Russell was maintaining a calm facade for the passengers' benefit. The reality was far more precarious. They were attempting to land an increasingly unresponsive aircraft in deteriorating weather conditions with minimal instrumentation and compromised controls. The sense of controlled urgency in the cabin intensified. Flight attendants made final checks, ensuring all passengers were properly secured. Dr. Blake administered another dose of medication to Thompson, whose breathing had become increasingly labored. Michael, Vanessa said urgently as he passed, using his first name for the first time. James says there's something you need to know about Reynolds. Something important. Michael knelt beside Thompson, who was struggling to remain conscious. What about Reynolds? He's not working alone, Thompson managed, his voice barely audible. The technology, too sophisticated for one person. He has backing, significant backing. Foreign intelligence? Michael asked, the security implications expanding exponentially. Thompson nodded weakly. We traced suspicious access to servers in Eastern Europe and Asia. Reynolds is just the technical expert. Someone else is pulling the strings. This revelation changed everything. What had seemed like a personal vendetta was potentially something much larger. A coordinated attack with national security implications. The aircraft suddenly dropped several hundred feet without warning, eliciting screams from throughout the cabin. Oxygen masks swung wildly from their compartments. The emergency lighting flickered ominously. Dad! Sophie's frightened voice cut through the chaos, piercing Michael's heart. He was at her side instantly, securing her seatbelt tighter and checking her oxygen mask. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just air pockets from the storm." But they both knew it was more than that. Sophie's small hand gripped his with surprising strength. "I'm scared, but I'm trying to be brave like Whiskers." "You're braver than Whiskers," Michael assured her, smoothing her hair with a gentle hand. "You're the bravest person I know." Another violent shudder ran through the aircraft. Through the window, Michael caught a glimpse of the right engine, where flames were now clearly visible around the cowling. Not just the normal blue glow of combustion, but actual fire licking along the engine housing. Michael pressed the call button, summoning Olivia Chen. "Fire in the right engine," he informed her quietly. "Alert the cockpit immediately." As Olivia hurried forward, Michael turned to Jason Harris, who had positioned himself strategically near the emergency exit. A silent communication passed between them. They were entering the most critical phase of the emergency. The intercom crackled to life again, Captain Russell's voice noticeably tenser than before. "Flight crew, prepare for immediate landing." This wasn't the standard announcement for normal approach. It was code for an emergency landing under duress. The cabin crew's movements became more urgent, their expressions professionally neutral, but their actions betraying the gravity of the situation. Michael turned to the passengers in his immediate vicinity. "When we land, exit quickly but orderly. Leave all belongings behind. If you're able, assist those who need help." Kyle Parker, who had been filming intermittently throughout the crisis, put his phone away completely. "I can help," he offered, his earlier smugness replaced by genuine determination. "I'm a certified lifeguard, trained in emergency response." Michael nodded, reassessing the young man. "Stay with the elderly couple in row 15. They'll need assistance during evacuation." As the aircraft descended through the storm clouds, intermittent visibility revealed glimpses of the terrain below, the sprawling complex of Peterson Air Force Base coming into view briefly before being obscured again by thick cloud cover. The radio in the cockpit crackled with increasing frequency as Peterson's approach control attempted to guide them in. Michael knew they would be preparing for worst-case scenarios: foam on the runways, emergency vehicles standing by, medical teams ready to receive casualties. "Final approach," came the announcement. "All passengers brace for landing." Michael demonstrated the position for Sophie, ensuring she was properly protected. Around them, passengers assumed the brace position with varying degrees of coordination. Through the cabin windows, emergency vehicle lights became visible on the ground below, dozens of them lining the runway, their red and blue flashes piercing through the rain and low clouds. The right engine suddenly emitted a terrible grinding noise, followed by a series of backfires. The aircraft yawed sharply to the right, fighting against the pilot's attempts to maintain a straight approach path. "Engine failure!" someone shouted from the back of the cabin. Michael knew what was happening. The compromised engine had finally succumbed to the stresses placed upon it. Now they were attempting to land on a single engine, with compromised hydraulics and minimal instrumentation, in severe weather conditions. The odds were stacking against them with each passing second. Sophie looked up at Michael, fear and trust battling in her eyes. "Dad, if we don't make it." "We'll make it," Michael interrupted firmly, refusing to entertain any other possibility. "I promised you the ocean, remember? We still have sandcastles to build." The ground rushed up to meet them, the runway lights emerging from the rain like a pathway of stars guiding them home. The aircraft bucked and shuddered, fighting against the crosswinds that threatened to push them off course. Michael tightened his grip on Sophie's hand, his mind filled with images of Rebecca, her smile, her laugh, her final brave act saving another's child. He had promised her he would keep Sophie safe, would give her the life and love she deserved. It was a promise he intended to keep, no matter what challenges the next few minutes might bring. "Brace, brace, brace!" the command echoed through the cabin as the aircraft made its final approach. Through the window, Michael caught sight of something that sent a surge of emotion through him. 3 F-22 Raptor fighter jets escorting their damaged aircraft, flying in tight formation despite the treacherous weather conditions. The Air Force had sent their best to guide them home. The wheels touched down with bone-jarring force, the aircraft bouncing once before settling onto the runway. Reverse thrusters engaged with a deafening roar as the pilots fought to slow their momentum. For a moment, it seemed they had made it, The landing rough but successful. Then came a sound that chilled Michael's blood, the screech of metal tearing as the damaged right engine finally separated from its mounting, tumbling across the runway in a shower of sparks and debris. The aircraft veered sharply right, skidding sideways despite the pilot's desperate efforts to maintain control. Emergency braking systems engaged automatically, adding to the cacophony of alarms and shuddering vibrations. Through it all, Michael maintained his protective position over Sophie, his body serving as a shield against whatever might come next. In those eternal seconds of chaos, his entire world narrowed to a single purpose: keeping his daughter safe. When the aircraft finally shuddered to a halt, an eerie silence fell over the cabin, broken only by the hiss of emergency slides deploying and the distant wail of emergency vehicle sirens approaching rapidly. "Evacuate! Evacuate!" Amanda Taylor's professional command cut through the momentary stillness, galvanizing passengers into action. Michael lifted his head, quickly assessing their situation. The aircraft had come to rest at an angle, but the fuselage appeared intact. Smoke was visible from the right wing where the engine had separated, but there were no immediate signs of fire inside the cabin. "Sophie, are you okay?" he asked urgently, examining his daughter for any signs of injury. She nodded, eyes wide but remarkably composed. "Did we crash?" "Not exactly," Michael explained, unbuckling her seatbelt. "We had a rough landing, but we're on the ground. Now we need to exit quickly, okay?" As passengers began moving toward the emergency exits, Michael turned his attention to Thompson, who would need assistance evacuating. To his alarm, the executive appeared unresponsive, his complexion now ashen gray. "Dr. Blake," Michael called, but the cardiologist was already there, checking Thompson's vital signs with urgent professionalism. "Cardiac arrest," she announced grimly. "We need to get him out of here immediately." Michael turned to Vanessa, whose perfect composure had finally cracked completely. "The emergency teams will be here any second. We'll get him the help he needs." The first responders were already entering the aircraft, moving with the coordinated efficiency of well-trained professionals. Air Force paramedics quickly took over Thompson's care, transferring him to a stretcher with practice movements. Outside, the storm continued to rage, rain lashing against the damaged aircraft as passengers descended emergency slides into the waiting arms of rescue personnel. The massive forms of firefighting vehicles surrounded the plane, their hoses ready to douse any flames that might erupt. Michael lifted Sophie into his arms, heading toward the nearest exit. "Remember how we practiced emergency slides at the air show last summer?" he asked, trying to frame the evacuation as an adventure rather than a terrifying necessity. Sophie nodded, clutching whiskers tightly. "Like a water park, but without the water." "Exactly," Michael smiled, his heart swelling with pride at her resilience. As they reached the exit, Michael saw 3 Air Force officers waiting at the bottom of the slide, their postures snapping to attention as they recognized him. "Nighthawk," one of them said, the familiar call sign carrying across the years like a bridge between his past and present. Michael hesitated briefly, the weight of his former identity settling on his shoulders once more. For 3 years he had been simply Michael Carter, Sophie's father. Now circumstance had forced Major Michael Nighthawk Carter back into existence. With Sophie held securely in his arms, Michael stepped onto the evacuation slide, leaving the damaged aircraft behind and moving toward whatever challenges still awaited them on the ground below. Rain lashed across the Peterson Air Force Base tarmac as Michael carried Sophie down the emergency evacuation slide. The storm that had complicated their landing now drenched the passengers huddled beneath emergency blankets, their faces illuminated by flashing lights from dozens of emergency vehicles. "Major Carter?" A uniformed officer approached through the downpour, snapping a crisp salute despite the weather. "Colonel Bryce, Base Operations. We've been expecting you, sir." Michael shifted Sophie in his arms, returning the salute with his free hand, a gesture that felt both foreign and familiar after 3 years of civilian life. "At ease, Colonel. I'm not in the service anymore." "With respect, sir, the Pentagon might disagree. They've been trying to reach you since we received the first distress call." The colonel's eyes shifted to Sophie. "This must be your daughter." Sophie studied the uniformed man with curious eyes. "Are you one of Dad's friends from when he flew planes?" Colonel Bryce smiled, his stern demeanor softening. "I never had that honor, young lady, but your father's reputation precedes him." He turned back to Michael. "Sir, We need to debrief you immediately. General Mitchell is waiting in the command center. Michael glanced toward the other passengers being escorted to emergency shelters. James Thompson was already on a stretcher, medical personnel working frantically as they rushed him toward a waiting ambulance. Vanessa hurried alongside, her designer clothes soaked by rain, all pretense of superiority abandoned in her fear for her husband. I need to make sure my daughter is taken care of first, Michael insisted. Of course, sir. We have a family center set up for passengers. Dr. Reynolds from our child psychology department is there to help the younger passengers process the trauma. Michael froze. Did you say Reynolds? Colonel Bryce checked his tablet. Yes, Dr. Allison Reynolds. Is there a problem? The name couldn't be coincidence. Is she related to Thomas Reynolds, former Air Force cyber warfare specialist? The colonel's expression shifted, alert to Michael's concern. His sister, I believe. Why do you ask? Michael's protective instincts surged. We need to secure that center immediately. Thomas Reynolds is the prime suspect in the cyber attack against our aircraft. Understanding dawned on the colonel's face, and he immediately raised his radio. Security team to Family Center Alpha, Priority 1. Lock down the facility, no one in or out until further notice. As the colonel issued rapid orders, Michael knelt before Sophie, keeping his voice calm despite the urgency pounding through him. Sweetheart, there's been a change of plans. You're going to stay with me a little longer, okay? Sophie nodded, clutching Whiskers closer. Is something wrong, Dad? Just a precaution, Michael assured her, though his mind was racing through worst-case scenarios. If Thomas Reynolds had enlisted his sister's help, the attack could be continuing on the ground, targeting survivors, specifically Thompson, whose medical emergency had been conveniently timed. Through the rain, Michael spotted Frank Cooper helping an elderly passenger toward the emergency shelter. Cooper, he called, waving the engineer over. Cooper jogged across the tarmac, the device they'd found in Thompson's briefcase, secured in a waterproof evidence bag. Carter, you need to see this. The transponder is still active, and it's not just transmitting location data, it's receiving signals too. Colonel Bryce examined the device with professional interest. Two-way communication. They're tracking Thompson in real time, which means they know we've landed, Michael concluded grimly, and they know Thompson is still alive. Sir, the colonel lowered his voice, glancing at Sophie, General Mitchell will want to hear this immediately. The national security implications are significant, I know. Michael made a quick decision. Cooper, I need you to accompany the colonel to the command center. Brief them on everything we've discovered about the device. I'll join you as soon as I can secure Sophie. As Cooper departed with the colonel, Michael surveyed the chaotic scene. Emergency personnel were efficiently moving passengers towards shelter, but the sheer number of people made tracking individuals difficult. In this confusion, Reynolds or someone working with him could easily approach Thompson under the guise of medical assistance. Michael spotted Jason Harris coordinating with Air Force security personnel near the ambulance where Thompson was being treated. The Air Marshal's training was evident in his methodical assessment of potential threats even in the midst of chaos. Harris, Michael called, making his way through the rain. We have a situation. The Air Marshal turned, immediately alert to Michael's tone. Thompson? Potential target. Reynolds has at least one accomplice on base. His sister, Dr. Allison Reynolds, assigned to the family center. There may be others. Harris nodded, immediately grasping the implications. I'll coordinate with base security to establish a protection detail for Thompson. What about the other passengers? Potential collateral targets if they get desperate. We need to maintain containment until we understand the full scope of the threat. Sophie, still in Michael's arms, had been listening to this exchange with the keen attention of a child who had learned early that adult conversations often contained important information. Dad, is the bad man who broke our plane trying to hurt people here too? Michael considered how to respond. He had always been honest with Sophie, believing that children deserve truth delivered appropriately for their age. We think he might try to hurt Mr. Thompson, the man who got sick on the plane, but we're going to stop him. Because that's what heroes do, Sophie stated with simple certainty. Michael smiled despite the gravity of the situation. That's what good people do when others are in danger. An Air Force security officer approached, her posture professional, but her eyes reflecting recognition when she saw Michael. Major Carter, I'm Captain Rodriguez. Colonel Bryce ordered me to escort you and your daughter to secure quarters. Michael studied her carefully, his instincts on high alert. Your commanding officer? Colonel Margaret Wilson, Base Security, she replied without hesitation. Michael nodded, satisfied with her response. A plant working for Reynolds wouldn't likely know the base command structure in detail. Lead the way, Captain. As they crossed the tarmac toward a nearby building, Michael caught sight of Olivia Chen helping Amanda Taylor organize the passengers. Despite the chaos, Olivia's movements remained efficient and purposeful, her medical training evident in how she prioritized those needing immediate attention. Seeing Michael, Olivia broke away and approached. They're saying someone deliberately attacked our aircraft, she said quietly, mindful of Sophie. Is it true? I'm afraid so, Michael confirmed, and the threat may not be over. Can you help coordinate with the flight crew to account for all passengers? We need to make sure no one wanders off, especially into restricted areas. Olivia nodded, understanding the unspoken concern. I'll work with Amanda. We've become quite the emergency team. Thank you, Michael said sincerely, for everything you did up there. You were exceptional. Just following the example you set in Sandstorm, she replied with a small smile, referring to the rescue mission where they had first met. Some lessons stay with you forever. As Olivia returned to her duties, Captain Rodriguez led Michael and Sophie into a secure building adjacent to the main command center. Unlike the utilitarian exterior, the interior was surprisingly comfortable, clearly designed for visiting VIPs rather than standard military personnel. These are General Mitchell's personal quarters when she visits from the Pentagon, Rodriguez explained. She insisted you use them. There's a secure communication line to the command center, and the entire wing is under heavy guard. Michael set Sophie down on a comfortable sofa, helping her remove her rain-soaked jacket. Is there somewhere she could get dry clothes? Already arranged, sir. Rodriguez indicated a small duffel bag on a nearby chair. Base exchange items in what we estimated would be her size. There are adult clothes for you as well. Once Rodriguez had departed, Michael helped Sophie change into dry clothes, simple sweatpants and a Peterson Air Force Base t-shirt that hung to her knees like a dress. The normality of the task was comforting amid the chaos of the day. Dad, Sophie said as Michael toweled her damp hair, are you going to be a major again now instead of fixing planes at the airport? The innocent question carried complex implications. Michael sat beside her on the sofa, choosing his words carefully. I'll always be your dad first, Sophie. That's my most important job. But right now, people need my help with a special problem that I know how to solve. Because you used to do special missions, Sophie nodded, processing this new understanding of her father. Like when you saved Miss Olivia when her helicopter crashed. That's right, Michael confirmed, surprised at her retention of details from Olivia's brief explanation. But after that, I decided being your dad was more important than flying missions. Because Mommy died, Sophie stated with the direct simplicity of children, and I needed you more than the Air Force did. Michael swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. Exactly right, sweetheart. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Michael moved cautiously, positioning himself between Sophie and the potential threat. Major Carter? A female voice called. General Sarah Mitchell, we need to talk. Michael opened the door to reveal a woman in her 50s with short silver hair and the unmistakable bearing of someone accustomed to command. Despite being in civilian clothes, her military background was evident in every precise movement. General, Michael acknowledged, immediately recognizing her from his previous service. It's been a while. 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days, General Mitchell replied with the hint of a smile. Not that anyone's counting. Her gaze shifted to Sophie. And this must be the reason you left us. Michael nodded. My daughter, Sophie. Sophie, this is General Mitchell. She was my boss when I was in the Air Force. Sophie stood politely, extending her hand as Michael had taught her. Pleased to meet you, ma'am. General Mitchell's expression softened as she shook the small hand. The pleasure is mine, Sophie. Your father was one of the finest officers I've ever commanded. Turning back to Michael, her expression grew serious. We need you in the command center. The situation has escalated significantly. Thomas Reynolds isn't working alone. We've confirmed foreign intelligence involvement. I suspected as much after speaking with Thompson, Michael replied. But I can't leave Sophie unprotected. Already arranged, Mitchell assured him. Lieutenant Parker is waiting outside. decorated combat veteran, now serving as my personal security. She'll stay with Sophie. Michael hesitated, the memory of Rebecca's death and his promise to never leave Sophie vulnerable still fresh, despite the passing years. Sophie, sensing his conflict, squeezed his hand. It's okay, Dad. I can be brave while you go help the other people. Whiskers and I will wait right here. Michael knelt to her level. Are you sure, sweetheart? I won't go if you're scared. Sophie considered this thoughtfully, then squared her small shoulders. I'm a little scared, but that's okay. Being brave means doing important things even when you're scared, remember? Pride swelled in Michael's chest. I remember. I'll be back as soon as I can. Lieutenant Parker entered, a capable-looking woman in her 30s with alert eyes that missed nothing. Sir, I'll guard her with my life, she promised quietly. Michael nodded, trusting his instincts about the lieutenant. Sophie, this is Lieutenant Parker. She's going to stay with you while I go to a meeting. Like a babysitter? Sophie asked. Like a guardian, Parker corrected with a smile. I hear you have a very brave rabbit. Maybe you could tell me his adventures while your dad is working. Sophie's face brightened. Whiskers has lots of adventures. He even helped a scared boy on the plane today. Michael kissed Sophie's forehead, then followed General Mitchell toward the command center, his mind already shifting from father to military strategist. The smooth transition between roles, something he had struggled with in the early days after Rebecca's death, now felt almost natural, a testament to the healing time had brought. The command center hummed with controlled urgency, dozens of personnel monitoring communications, security feeds, and intelligence reports. At the center of the room stood a large tactical display showing the base and surrounding areas, with particular focus on the damaged aircraft still visible on the runway. Colonel Bryce and Frank Cooper were deep in discussion with several intelligence officers, the mysterious device now connected to specialized equipment that appeared to be analyzing its transmissions. Carter, Cooper acknowledged as Michael approached. We've made progress. The device is communicating with servers in Eastern Europe, specifically through relays we've traced to known intelligence fronts. Which confirms Thompson's claim about foreign involvement, Michael noted. What about Reynolds? Colonel Bryce brought up a personnel file on a nearby screen. Thomas Reynolds discharged from the Air Force 3 years ago following your report on ethical violations. Subsequently hired by Thompson Defense Technologies as a cybersecurity specialist. Resigned 6 months ago, ostensibly to start his own consulting firm. But actually to work for foreign interests, General Mitchell continued. We've had him on a watch list for suspected technology transfer, but nothing concrete enough for an arrest. Until now, Michael observed, the attack on the aircraft provides definitive evidence of both sabotage and espionage. If we can catch him, Mitchell agreed. Current intelligence suggests he's in the vicinity, likely monitoring Thompson's condition. The question is how and where. Michael studied the tactical display, his mind working through possibilities. His sister, has she been secured? Dr. Allison Reynolds is in custody, Colonel Bryce confirmed. Preliminary questioning indicates she may have been an unwitting accomplice. Reynolds told her he was conducting a security exercise and needed her to report on passenger processing. Classic manipulation of a trusted insider, Michael noted. What about Thompson? How's his condition? Critical but stable, a medical officer reported. He's being prepped for emergency surgery at the base hospital. Full security protocols in place. No unauthorized personnel allowed access. Michael nodded, then turned to Cooper. The device, could it be transmitting more than just location data? Medical telemetry, perhaps? Cooper's eyes widened as he grasped Michael's implication. If it's sophisticated enough, possibly. Let me check for biomedical transmission signatures. As Cooper worked, Michael continued analyzing the situation. Reynolds would need to monitor the data stream to confirm Thompson's condition, and he'd need a secure location with technology access. We've locked down all base communications, Colonel Bryce stated. Any unauthorized transmissions would be detected immediately. Not if he's using military-grade encryption designed to evade exactly that kind of monitoring, Michael countered. Remember, he was cyber warfare. He knows our protocols intimately. General Mitchell considered this, then made a decision. Full spectrum scan of all frequencies, authorized and unauthorized. And I want every security camera feed from the last hour analyzed for facial recognition matches to Reynolds. As the command center personnel implemented these orders, Michael's attention was drawn to a notification appearing on the tactical display, an incoming transmission from the hospital. "Sir," a communications officer called, "Dr. Blake is requesting to speak with you. She says it's urgent, about Thompson." Michael accepted the call, Dr. Blake's worried face appearing on screen. "Dr. Blake, what's the situation?" "Thompson is conscious and insisting on speaking with you before surgery," she reported. "He says he has critical information about Reynolds that he'll only share with you personally. His condition is deteriorating rapidly. If you're coming, it needs to be now." Michael glanced at General Mitchell, who nodded. "Go, take a security team. We'll continue working the intelligence angle from here." As Michael prepared to leave, Cooper called him over, excitement evident in his voice. "Carter, you were right. The device is monitoring Thompson's vital signs, and it's communicating with a receiver somewhere on base. We've narrowed the location to the southwestern quadrant." "That's where the hospital is located," Colonel Bryce noted, the implications immediately clear. "Reynolds is already there," Michael concluded grimly. "He's monitoring Thompson from inside the facility." The realization galvanized the command center into action. Orders were issued rapidly. Security teams mobilized toward the hospital. Michael joined the lead team, his mind racing through potential scenarios. None of them good. The storm had intensified, lightning illuminating the base in brief, stark flashes as Michael hurried toward the waiting vehicle. The rain seemed to carry whispers of danger, of time running out, of promises about to be broken. "I'll drive," Jason Harris appeared suddenly, keys already in hand. "Better to have someone who knows what we're up against." Michael nodded gratefully, climbing into the passenger seat as Harris gunned the engine. "Thompson's the target, but Reynolds won't hesitate to take out anyone who gets in his way." "Including you," Harris observed as they sped toward the hospital. "Maybe especially you, considering your history." The base hospital loomed ahead, its windows glowing through the rain like watchful eyes. Despite the late hour in the storm, the facility bustled with activity. Medical personnel treating passengers from the emergency landing alongside the base's regular patients. As they approached the entrance, Michael's phone vibrated with an incoming message. His heart froze when he saw the sender. "Unknown." The message contained just 2 words in an image. "Choose wisely." The attached photo showed Sophie in the VIP quarters, Lieutenant Parker visible in the background, clearly taken within the past few minutes. "Harris," Michael's voice was deadly calm, belying the storm raging within him. "Reynolds has eyes on Sophie." Harris examined the photo, his professional assessment immediate. "Taken from a security feed, he's hacked into the base surveillance system." A second message appeared. "Thompson or your daughter, Nighthawk. You can't protect both. You have 10 minutes to leave the hospital alone, or the lieutenant gets a message that will trigger her elimination protocol." Michael's blood ran cold. He's turned Parker. She's one of his assets. "We need to alert base security," Harris began, reaching for his radio. "No," Michael stopped him. "Any official communication might be monitored. Reynolds has clearly penetrated their systems deeply." "So what's the play?" Harris asked, professional calm masking the urgency of their situation. Michael made a swift decision. "You secure Thompson, I'll handle Sophie." "Splitting up is exactly what he wants," Harris warned. "I know," Michael acknowledged grimly. "But he's miscalculated. He thinks threatening Sophie gives him leverage over me. He doesn't understand that it just ensures I'll take him down, whatever it costs." The determination in Michael's voice left no room for argument. Harris nodded once, recognizing the resolve of a father protecting his child. "Go, I'll make sure Thompson stays alive." As Harris headed for the hospital entrance, Michael took a different path, circling toward a service entrance he had noted on the tactical display. His phone vibrated again. Another message from Reynolds. "Clock's ticking, Nighthawk, 9 minutes." Michael ignored it, focusing instead on contacting the one person he knew he could trust implicitly. He dialed Olivia Chen's number, keeping his voice low as she answered. "Chen, I need your help. Emergency protocol, Sierra 7. There was a brief pause as Olivia processed the code, a distress signal they had established during their time in combat together. "Location and threat assessment. VIP quarters, Section B. One hostile, armed and embedded with potential hostage situation. High-value package at risk." "Sophie," Olivia realized immediately. "I'm 3 minutes out. Approach?" Medical distraction. The hostel is expecting military. Understood. On my way. Michael continued his circuitous route toward the VIP quarters, using service corridors and maintenance paths to avoid main thoroughfares where security cameras would be monitoring. His military training merged seamlessly with fatherly instinct, creating a singular focus that burned away all distractions. 7 minutes remained on Reynolds' ultimatum when Michael reached the exterior of the VIP section. Through a rain-streaked window, he could see Sophie sitting on the sofa, apparently reading a book to Whiskers. Lieutenant Parker stood nearby, her posture relaxed but her eyes constantly scanning, the stance of a professional preparing to execute a mission. Michael's phone vibrated again. 6 minutes, Nighthawk. Still at the hospital? Bad choice, Bramats. A soft footfall behind him announced Olivia's arrival. She had changed into medical scrubs and carried a small emergency kit. Status? Parker is the immediate threat, Michael explained quietly. She's waiting for a signal from Reynolds. We need to neutralize her without endangering Sophie. Olivia nodded, adjusting her medical ID badge. Standard medical check following emergency landing. I'll create an opening. As Olivia approached the main entrance to the VIP section, Michael circled to a maintenance access he had identified earlier. Years of extraction missions had taught him to always locate secondary entry points, a habit that had saved countless lives and was now crucial to saving his daughter. Inside, Olivia knocked confidently on the door to the VIP suite. Medical follow-up, she called. Standard protocol for all passengers, especially children. Lieutenant Parker opened the door cautiously, her right hand hovering near her sidearm, a subtle tell that confirmed Michael's suspicions. We didn't request medical assistance. It's mandatory, Olivia insisted, her tone professional but firm, especially for minors. Airline regulations and Air Force protocols both require it. Parker hesitated, clearly calculating her options. Refusing would seem suspicious, but allowing Olivia entry complicated her mission. Sophie's voice drifted from inside. Is that a doctor? Dad said I should tell a doctor if my ears still hurt from the plane. This innocent comment decided the matter. Parker stepped aside, allowing Olivia to enter. Make it quick. The major will be back soon. That's fine, Olivia smiled pleasantly. This will only take a few minutes. As Olivia began a basic examination of Sophie, keeping herself positioned between the child and Parker, Michael used the distraction to access the maintenance corridor that connected to a small utility closet within the VIP suite. Inside the darkened closet, Michael could hear the conversation in the main room clearly. Does your head hurt anywhere? Olivia was asking Sophie, her voice deliberately loud to cover any sounds Michael might make. No, just my ears feel funny. Dad says it's because of the air pressure changing really fast. Your dad is right, Olivia agreed. He knows a lot about planes, doesn't he? He fixes them at work, Sophie replied proudly. But before that, he flew them in the Air Force and saved people, like you. Michael eased the closet door open a fraction, assessing the situation. Parker stood with her back to him, attention divided between Olivia's examination of Sophie and the windows overlooking the approach to the building. Her hand remained close to her weapon, ready to draw at a moment's notice. Olivia caught Michael's eye briefly as she continued the examination, understanding passing between them without words. She shifted position slightly, creating a better angle for Michael's approach. Lieutenant, could you help me for a moment? Olivia asked casually. I need to check her lymph nodes while I test her reflexes. As Parker stepped forward, momentarily focused on Olivia's request, Michael made his move. Years of combat training took over as he emerged silently from the closet, covering the distance in 3 swift strides. Before Parker could react, he had immobilized her in a precision hold that cut off blood flow to the brain without restricting her airway, a technique taught to special operators for silent neutralization. Parker struggled briefly before losing consciousness. Michael lowered her carefully to the floor, removing her sidearm and checking for additional weapons. Sophie's eyes had gone wide, but remarkably, she hadn't screamed. Dad, you came from the magic door like in our stories. Something like that, sweetheart. Michael managed a reassuring smile despite the gravity of the situation. We need to go now, okay? Quickly and quietly. Is Lieutenant Parker sick? Sophie asked, noticing the unconscious woman. Olivia answered smoothly. She's just taking a little nap. We need to let her rest while we go somewhere safer. Michael secured Parker with her own restraints, then checked his phone. A new message had arrived. Time's up, Nighthawk. You made your choice. Seconds later, alarms began blaring throughout the base, the unmistakable sound of a security breach in progress. Emergency lights flashed as automated lockdown procedures initiated. Reynolds is making his move on Thompson, Michael realized aloud, using the chaos as cover. Olivia was already on her feet, medical persona abandoned. We need to get Sophie to a secure location, then respond to the hospital. Michael nodded, lifting Sophie into his arms. There's a hardened bunker beneath the command center. General Mitchell will be there by now. As they exited the VIP quarters, the full scope of Reynolds' plan became apparent. The base was in chaos. Security systems had been compromised, showing false alarms in multiple sectors simultaneously. Emergency personnel rushed in different directions, responding to phantom threats while the real danger remained concealed. He's created a diversion, Olivia observed as they hurried toward the command center. Classic misdirection. Michael's phone rang. Bayi Bawashvirani, Harris calling from the hospital. Carter, we have a situation. Thompson's gone. Medical staff say a team of Air Force security officers evacuated him minutes ago. Not security, Reynolds and his team, Michael corrected grimly. They're using the false alarms as cover to extract Thompson. For interrogation or elimination, Harris asked, the question rhetorical. They both knew the answer. Thompson wouldn't survive long in Reynolds' custody. Track them, Michael ordered. They'll need to leave the base. All exits should be monitored. Already on it, Harris confirmed, but with base systems compromised. Use old-school methods, Michael interrupted. Physical observation posts. Reynolds will expect high-tech monitoring, not human eyes. As they approached the command center, Michael could see that Reynolds' attack had been comprehensive. Even the primary security doors had been affected, locked in security mode to prevent access, or more concerning, to prevent response teams from deploying. Dad, Sophie whispered, her arms tight around his neck. The bad man who broke our plane is trying to hurt Mr. Thompson, isn't he? Michael met his daughter's eyes, seeing intelligence and courage that reminded him so much of Rebecca. It made his chest ache. Yes, sweetheart, but we're going to stop him. Like how you saved our plane? Exactly like that. General Mitchell emerged from an emergency exit, accompanied by security personnel. Carter, thank God, we've been trying to reach you. The entire system is compromised. Communications, security, everything. Reynolds has taken Thompson, Michael reported succinctly, using the chaos as cover for extraction. Mitchell's expression darkened. He won't get far. I've ordered manual override of all exit points. Nothing leaves this base without physical authorization. He'll have planned for that, Michael warned. Reynolds thinks several steps ahead. It's why he was so effective in cyber warfare. What's his most likely exit strategy? Mitchell asked, deferring to Michael's insight into their adversary. Michael considered, analyzing the situation as he would a combat extraction. He won't use ground transportation, too easy to block, and he can't use the main airfield, too visible. Understanding dawned. The auxiliary helicopter pad, Mitchell realized. It's minimal security, designed for emergency medical evacuations. And conveniently located near the hospital, Michael added, perfect for rapid extraction with a medical patient. Mitchell immediately issued orders, mobilizing the limited personnel who could be reached through secure channels. We need to move now if we're going to intercept them. Michael looked down at Sophie, still in his arms. Despite her remarkable composure, he couldn't risk bringing her closer to danger. I need somewhere safe for my daughter. My office, Mitchell decided, hardened against electronic surveillance and physically secure. Lieutenant Ramirez will guard her personally. She nodded toward a serious-looking officer who had served on her personal security team for years. Michael knelt before Sophie, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Sweetheart, I need you to stay with Lieutenant Ramirez while I help stop the bad guys. Can you do that for me? Sophie nodded solemnly. Will you come back soon? As soon as I can, Michael promised, the memory of making a similar promise to Rebecca on his last deployment hanging heavy between them. Keep Whiskers safe, okay? I will, Sophie assured him, hugging her rabbit tightly. And Dad, be careful. Michael kissed her forehead, then stood to face Mitchell and Harris. Let's finish this. As they hurried toward the auxiliary helipad, Michael's thoughts remained divided, part calculating commander planning an interception, part worried father counting the minutes until he could return to Sophie. The dual nature of his existence, which had once torn him apart after Rebecca's death, now fueled him with dual purpose, to protect both his daughter and the innocent lives threatened by Reynolds' actions. The storm continued to rage overhead, lightning illuminating their path in stark flashes as they approached the helipad. Through sheets of rain, Michael could make out the silhouette of a medical evacuation helicopter, its rotors already spinning up for departure. Several figures moved around it, one on a stretcher being loaded aboard. Thompson, unconscious or sedated. There, Michael pointed. 4 hostiles, 1 package. Standard extraction formation. Harris drew his sidearm, eyes narrowed against the rain. How do you want to play this? Michael assessed the situation with the rapid calculation of a veteran combat officer. Direct approach is too risky with Thompson in the middle. We need to separate Reynolds from his team. Olivia, who had insisted on accompanying them, checked her borrowed sidearm. Distraction pattern? Michael nodded. Mitchell, can your people cut the helipad lights on my signal? We'll use the darkness and storm as cover. As Mitchell coordinated with her remaining secure communications, Michael outlined his plan. It was high risk, but with Thompson's life and crucial national security information at stake, the alternative was unacceptable. Lightning flashed again, briefly illuminating the scene before them. In that instant, Michael caught a clear glimpse of the man supervising the loading operation. Thomas Reynolds, looking remarkably unchanged from when Michael had last seen him 3 years ago during the disciplinary hearing that ended his military career. There he is, Michael confirmed quietly. Our primary target. Harris checked his weapon one final time. Ready when you are, Nighthawk. Michael took a deep breath, centering himself as he had before countless dangerous missions. But this time a new thought steadied him. The image of Sophie waiting for his return, trusting him to come back safely. It wasn't a distraction as he might once have feared. It was foundation, purpose, strength. On my mark, he said, eyes fixed on the helicopter as the storm raged around them. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1, now! The helipad lights cut out instantly, plunging the area into darkness broken only by lightning flashes and the helicopter's navigation lights. Michael moved with the practiced precision of a combat veteran, using the storm's fury as cover. Harris circled left while Olivia took position on the right, creating a triangulation pattern that would allow them to approach from multiple angles. The helicopter's engine whine masked their footsteps as they closed in on Reynolds' extraction team. Through the rain, Michael could see Thompson being secured inside the aircraft, his unconscious form strapped to a medical gurney. Reynolds stood at the edge of the helipad, scanning the darkness with the watchful eyes of someone who expected pursuit. Michael activated his radio, voice barely audible above the storm. Mitchell, status on base security? Manual lockdown of all sectors complete, the general responded. Reynolds' team is isolated. No reinforcements possible. Roger that, moving to intercept. A lightning flash illuminated the scene for a split second, revealing Reynolds' face in stark detail. The same cold calculation Michael remembered from their final confrontation 3 years ago. But now there was something else, a desperate edge that made him even more dangerous. Michael pressed forward, using the helicopter's bulk as cover. 20 feet away, he could now hear Reynolds issuing final instructions to his team. Once we're airborne, activate the secondary protocol. The base systems are compromised enough to cover our exit, but we need to ensure no pursuit. One of Reynolds' men nodded, adjusting something on a tablet. Ready to implement on your command. What about Nighthawk? He made his choice, Reynolds replied coldly. By now, he's discovered that threatening his daughter was the mistake that will cost him everything. Michael felt ice in his veins at the casual mention of Sophie. Reynolds had always been methodical, but this level of calculated malice was new and deeply personal. A sudden break in the storm provided a momentary clearing, and Michael knew their window of opportunity was narrowing. He gave the signal, and 3 actions happened simultaneously. Harris targeted the pilot through the helicopter's side window. Olivia disabled the nearest guard with a precision strike, and Michael emerged from cover directly in Reynolds' path. It's over, Thomas, Michael called above the storm, weapon trained steadily on his former subordinate. Step away from the helicopter. Reynolds froze momentarily, genuine surprise crossing his features before a slow smile spread across his face. Nighthawk, you never could make the hard choices, could you? Your daughter or the mission, and here you are, trying to have both. There was never a choice to make, Michael replied evenly. Lieutenant Parker has been neutralized. Your surveillance hack has been detected. Base security is already isolating and eliminating your access points. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Reynolds' face, quickly masked by contempt. Always so confident. Did you really think I'd rely on just one compromised asset? One surveillance access point? No, Michael acknowledged. I expected redundancies, fail-safes, multiple vectors of attack. That's how you always operated. Methodical. Thorough. Then you know you can't win this. Reynolds gestured toward the helicopter. Thompson has information that certain interested parties will pay handsomely for. Information that could reshape the balance of power in next-generation defense systems. And revenge against me was just a bonus? Michael asked, maintaining his position despite the rain plastering his clothes to his skin. Reynolds' expression hardened. You destroyed my career with your self-righteous ethics report. Years of service, canceled because I saw that the future of warfare doesn't include your precious human judgment. The helicopter pilot, sensing the confrontation, increased power to the rotors. The wind from the blades combined with the storm to create a maelstrom that threatened to unbalance anyone not braced against it. Harris's voice came through Michael's earpiece. Pilots not standing down. 3 hostiles still active inside the aircraft. Thompson appears unconscious, but alive. Michael kept his focus on Reynolds. You were removing safety protocols from autonomous weapon systems. Systems that would have killed civilians without human oversight. Acceptable collateral damage in exchange for tactical superiority, Reynolds shot back. Thompson understood that, until he developed a conscience. Started investigating his own company. Found my fingerprints. So you targeted his aircraft knowing I would be on board. 2 problems solved at once. Reynolds smiled coldly. Efficiency was always my strength. Speaking of which, he glanced at his watch with deliberate slowness. In approximately 30 seconds, this entire conversation becomes irrelevant. Michael felt the hairs on his neck rise, a warning instinct honed through years of combat. What have you done? Insurance policy, Reynolds replied simply. If I don't enter a cancellation code every 5 minutes, a cascade of destructive commands executes automatically, starting with the base hospital's life support systems. The implication struck Michael like a physical blow. The hospital was filled with passengers from their flight, including children. Sophie was safe in Mitchell's office, but dozens of innocent lives were still at risk. You're bluffing, Michael challenged, though his instincts told him otherwise. Reynolds merely raised an eyebrow. 20 seconds. The first wave targets ventilators and medication dispensers. The second wave, 90 seconds later, overloads electrical systems in critical care areas. Quite elegant, actually. Michael could see the truth in Reynolds' eyes. This wasn't a bluff. He glanced toward Harris and Olivia, who had heard everything through their comms. A silent understanding passed between them. 10 seconds, Reynolds continued, his confidence growing. Stand down, Nighthawk. Let me leave with Thompson, and I'll give you the cancellation code. Michael lowered his weapon slightly, not surrendering, but signaling willingness to negotiate. The code first. That's not how this works. Reynolds shook his head. The helicopter leaves, then you get the code. Or you can try to stop me and live with the consequences. 5 seconds. 4. 3. Wait, Michael said, holstering his weapon in a gesture of compliance. Take Thompson. Give me the code. Reynolds smiled triumphantly. Power down your communications, all of you, now. Michael complied, motioning for Harris and Olivia to do the same. As they switched off their radios, Reynolds approached, confident in his victory. The code, Reynolds, Michael demanded, keeping his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. Reynolds leaned close, his mouth near Michael's ear to be heard above the helicopter noise. The code is irrelevant. There was never any hospital hack. But your reaction, that was priceless. Still the hero, willing to sacrifice the mission for innocent lives. Michael's hand shot out, gripping Reynolds' wrist with crushing force. You gambled everything on a bluff? Not everything. Reynolds winced but maintained his composure. Just enough to confirm what I already knew about you. Predictable to the end. In one fluid motion, Michael spun Reynolds around, using the man's own momentum against him. Harris, take him! Harris moved with practiced efficiency, securing Reynolds while Michael sprinted toward the helicopter. Inside, the two remaining operatives realized their leader had been captured. One lunged for the controls, attempting to initiate takeoff despite the pilot's protests. Michael leapt onto the helicopter's skid as it began to lift, hauling himself into the cabin with combat-honed strength. The first operative turned, weapon raised, but Olivia's precise shot from below struck his shoulder, sending him crumpling against the far wall. The second operative abandoned the controls and charged Michael directly, desperation making him reckless. Michael sidestepped, using the helicopter's confined space to his advantage. A swift series of movements, honed through years of close-quarters combat training, left the man unconscious on the cabin floor. Land this aircraft now, Michael ordered the pilot, who immediately complied, recognizing the futility of resistance. As the helicopter settled back onto the helipad, Michael checked Thompson's condition. The executive was alive but heavily sedated, his complexion still alarmingly gray. Medical monitors attached to his gurney showed a weak but stable heartbeat. Outside, Harris had secured Reynolds, who glared at Michael with undisguised hatred as he emerged from the helicopter with Thompson's gurney. You've changed, Reynolds spat. The Nighthawk I knew would never have risked a high-value intelligence asset for uncertain civilian casualties. Michael regarded his former subordinate calmly. You're right, I have changed. I understand now what truly matters. And it isn't mission parameters or tactical objectives. Your daughter, Reynolds sneered. Your weakness. My strength, Michael corrected. She reminds me every day what we're fighting to protect. Not abstract concepts of national security, but real people with real lives. The base security team arrived, led by Colonel Bryce. Reynolds and his team were quickly taken into custody, their expressions revealing the dawning realization that their carefully orchestrated plan had collapsed entirely. General Mitchell approached, relief evident beneath her professional demeanor. Well done, Carter. Thompson? Alive but needs immediate medical attention, Michael reported. And we need to verify the hospital systems weren't actually compromised. Reynolds claimed it was a bluff, but already being checked, Mitchell confirmed. Preliminary assessment shows no intrusion into medical systems, but we're taking no chances. Michael nodded, then asked the question foremost in his mind. Sophie? Safe. Lieutenant Ramirez reports she's been reading stories to her rabbit and asking when her dad will finish catching the bad guys. A weight lifted from Michael's chest. Despite the rain still falling around them, despite the chaos of the past hours, knowing Sophie was safe made everything else manageable. Get Thompson to surgery, Michael instructed the medical team that had arrived, and I need to see my daughter. Mitchell nodded understanding. Debrief can wait. Go to her. As Michael turned to leave, Olivia touched his arm lightly. You did good, Nighthawk. Rebecca would be proud. The simple statement struck Michael deeply. In the years since Rebecca's death, he had often wondered if his choices would have met with her approval, leaving his military career to raise Sophie, prioritizing their daughter's well-being above all else. Thank you, he replied simply, the words inadequate for the emotion behind them. Michael found Sophie exactly as Mitchell had described, sitting cross-legged on the floor of the general's office, whiskers propped up beside her as she read aloud from a children's book Lieutenant Ramirez had found. Her face lit up when she saw him, the book instantly forgotten as she launched herself into his arms. Dad, did you catch the bad guys? We did, Michael confirmed, holding her close, inhaling the sweet, familiar scent of her hair. All of them. I knew you would, Sophie declared with absolute certainty. Whiskers said you're the best bad guy catcher in the whole world. Michael smiled, his heart full. Whiskers is very smart. Lieutenant Ramirez let me call him Alex, and he showed me pictures of his little girl. Sophie continued, her ability to make friends undimmed by the day's traumatic events. She has a rabbit too, but hers is pink. I told him Whiskers could be friends with her rabbit when they visit. Michael glanced at Lieutenant Ramirez, who stood at attention nearby, his professional demeanor softened by a slight smile. Thank you, Lieutenant, Michael said sincerely. My pleasure, sir, Ramirez replied. Your daughter is quite remarkable. She told me all about how she helped calm the other children on the plane. Sophie nodded earnestly. I was scared too, but Dad says that's okay because being brave means doing important things even when you're scared. The simple repetition of his own words, delivered with such conviction, filled Michael with a pride that transcended any he had felt during his military career. Whatever else he had accomplished in life, helping shape this resilient, compassionate child was his greatest achievement. Sir, Lieutenant Ramirez interjected respectfully, General Mitchell asked me to inform you that Mr. Thompson is out of surgery. His condition is stable, and he's asking to speak with you. Michael nodded, then looked down at Sophie. Sweetheart, I need to visit the man who got sick on our plane. Would you like to come with me, or would you prefer to stay here with Lieutenant Ramirez? Sophie considered this seriously. Is the man still sick? He's getting better, but he's in the hospital. Then we should visit him, Sophie decided firmly. Mom always said visiting people in hospitals is important because it helps them feel less alone. Once again, Rebecca's influence shone through their daughter, her compassion living on despite her absence. Michael kissed Sophie's forehead gently. Your mom was very wise. The base hospital had returned to normal operations. The false alarms triggered by Reynolds' team resolved. Medical personnel moved efficiently through corridors, attending to both military personnel and the civilian passengers from their flight. Dr. Blake met them outside Thompson's room, her professional demeanor belied by the shadows of exhaustion beneath her eyes. He's weak but stable, she reported. The surgery was successful, but he'll need significant recovery time and eventual additional procedures. Is he well enough for visitors? Michael asked, gesturing to Sophie. Dr. Blake smiled at the child. A brief visit should be fine. He's been quite insistent about speaking with you, Major Carter. Inside the room, James Thompson lay propped against pillows, monitoring equipment surrounding his bed and an IV steadily dripping medication into his arm. His complexion remained pale, but some of the gray pallor had receded. Vanessa Pearson sat beside him, her designer clothes replaced by simple hospital-provided scrubs, her perfect makeup long since washed away by tears and rain. She looked up as they entered, recognition and something like shame crossing her features when she saw Sophie. Your daughter, she said softly, the one with the rabbit. Sophie nodded, holding up Whiskers for inspection. This is Whiskers. He helps people not be scared. Vanessa's carefully constructed facade crumbled further at the child's simple statement. I was very scared today, she admitted. I still am. That's okay, Sophie assured her with the wisdom of children. Dad says everyone gets scared sometimes. Thompson stirred, his eyes opening slowly to focus on Michael. Nighthawk, he managed, his voice weak but determined. You got Reynolds. We did, Michael confirmed. His entire network is being dismantled as we speak. The foreign intelligence connection has been confirmed. Thompson nodded slightly, then noticed Sophie. And who might this be? My daughter Sophie, Michael introduced. Sophie, this is Mr. Thompson. He was on our plane. The one who got sick, Sophie recalled. Are you feeling better now? A genuine smile touched Thompson's pale lips. A little better, yes. Thank you for asking. Vanessa rose from her chair, gesturing for Sophie to take her place. Would you like to sit? Maybe you could tell James about Whiskers. I think he could use a brave rabbit story right now. As Sophie settled in, happily launching into one of Whiskers' many adventures, Thompson beckoned Michael closer. I owe you my life, he said quietly, and an apology. I misjudged you, both 3 years ago and on the flight. Professional disagreements happen, Michael replied diplomatically. Thompson shook his head weakly. It was more than that. I resented your opposition to the Icarus project, saw it as military old guard resisting inevitable progress. And now? Now I understand what you were trying to protect. Thompson's gaze shifted to Sophie, who was demonstrating how Whiskers performed particularly brave feats of imaginary heroism. Human judgment, compassion, the things AI can't replicate and shouldn't. Michael nodded, accepting the olive branch for what it was. What will you do now? Your company will undergo significant restructuring, Thompson finished, starting with a complete security overhaul and ethical review of all autonomous systems. Vanessa joined the conversation, her voice low to avoid interrupting Sophie's storytelling. We've been talking before his surgery and since he woke up. Things will be different now. Michael could see the genuine change in both of them, not just in their attitude toward him, but in how they looked at each other. Crisis had a way of stripping away pretense, revealing what truly mattered. "Your daughter is extraordinary," Vanessa added, "the way she helped the other children on the flight, even though she was frightened herself." "She gets that from her mother," Michael said softly. Understanding passed between them. The knowledge that Michael had lost someone precious, that his single parenthood wasn't a lifestyle choice but a necessity born of tragedy. "Major Carter," Thompson began, then corrected himself. "Michael, I'd like to establish a foundation for children who've lost parents in acts of heroism, educational support, mentorship programs, that sort of thing. I'd be honored if you would consult on its development." The offer was unexpected, but Michael could see the sincerity behind it. "I'd be happy to review your proposal when you're recovered, Doctor." Blake entered the room, gently reminding them that Thompson needed rest. As Michael prepared to leave with Sophie, Vanessa touched his arm hesitantly. "I said terrible things on that plane," she admitted, her voice thick with regret. "Made judgments based on appearances, on my own insecurities disguised as superiority. I'm truly sorry." "We all have moments we're not proud of," Michael replied. "It's what we learn from them that matters." Sophie, having concluded her story to Thompson's evident delight, rejoined her father. "Mr. Thompson said Whiskers is the bravest rabbit he's ever met," she reported proudly. "High praise indeed," Michael smiled, taking her small hand in his. Outside the hospital room, they found General Mitchell waiting, her posture military perfect, but her expression unusually gentle as she regarded Sophie. "Major Carter, a moment of your time." Michael nodded, then knelt beside Sophie. "Sweetheart, can you wait with Dr. Blake for just a minute while I talk to General Mitchell?" "Is it about the bad guys?" Sophie asked perceptively. "Something like that," Michael confirmed. Once Sophie was happily engaged in conversation with Dr. Blake, Mitchell led Michael a short distance away. "The Pentagon is quite interested in your involvement today," she began without preamble. "As am I." Michael tensed slightly, anticipating where this might be heading. "I'm not looking to return to active duty, General. My focus is Sophie." "I understand that," Mitchell assured him, "and I respect it. But your expertise is too valuable to lose completely, especially in developing protocols against the kind of attack Reynolds orchestrated." "What are you suggesting?" "A consulting position," Mitchell explained. "Special advisor on cyber-physical threats to aviation and defense systems. Limited hours, flexible schedule, much of it remote work you could do from home. No deployments, no relocations." Michael considered the offer thoughtfully. "And Sophie?" "Remains your priority," Mitchell confirmed. "We adjust to your schedule, not vice versa. This isn't about pulling you back into service, Michael. It's about finding a way for you to serve that honors your commitment to your daughter." The offer was tempting in ways Michael hadn't expected. The past day had awakened something he had deliberately suppressed for 3 years. Not just the adrenaline of crisis response, but the satisfaction of using his specialized skills to protect others. "I'll consider it," he promised. "But I need to talk with Sophie first. Any major change in our lives has to be her decision too." Mitchell nodded, a hint of a smile touching her lips. "I expected nothing less. Take your time. The offer stands when you're ready." As Michael returned to Sophie, his mind was already turning over possibilities. A role that allowed him to contribute his expertise while maintaining his primary focus on Sophie might be the balance he hadn't realized he was missing. "Dad, can we go to the ocean now?" Sophie asked as they left the hospital, the storm having finally passed, leaving behind puddles that reflected a sky beginning to clear. Michael laughed, the simple question grounding him in what mattered most. "Not quite yet, sweetheart. We need to finish some things here first, and then get our luggage from the airport." "But we will go," Sophie persisted. "You promised we'd build sandcastles." "And we will," Michael assured her. "A promise is a promise." 3 days later, Michael stood at the edge of the Pacific Ocean, watching as Sophie carefully constructed an elaborate sandcastle, her face a study in concentration. Whiskers supervised from a safe distance, propped against a beach bag to avoid getting sandy. The aftermath of the emergency landing and Reynolds' capture had been a whirlwind of debriefings, statements, and arrangements. But General Mitchell had expedited their release, ensuring they could continue their planned vacation with minimal delay. Michael's phone buzzed with a message from Olivia. "How's the beach? Reynolds talking. Full international conspiracy confirmed. Details when you're back. Enjoy your time with Sophie. You've earned it." He smiled, typing a quick reply before returning his attention to Sophie's architectural efforts. The sandcastle had grown impressively, complete with a moat and shell decorations. "Dad, come help," Sophie called, waving him over. "I'm building Whiskers, his very own castle." Michael joined her on the sand, following her detailed instructions for tower placement and drawbridge construction. As they worked together, he found himself more present, more at peace than he had been in years. "Sophie," he began carefully, "how would you feel if I did a little bit of work with the Air Force again? Not flying missions or going away, but helping them with special problems sometimes, mostly from home." Sophie considered this, her small face serious. "Would you still pick me up from school every day?" "Absolutely." "And read stories at bedtime?" "Without fail." She nodded, satisfied with these essential guarantees. "Then I think it's okay. You're really good at fixing broken planes and catching bad guys." Michael laughed, touched by her simple assessment of his complex skill set. "Thank you for understanding, sweetheart." "Dad?" Sophie looked up from her sandcastle, suddenly thoughtful. "Do you think Mom would be proud of us for being brave on the plane and helping people?" The question caught Michael off guard, emotion tightening his throat. He pulled Sophie into a gentle hug, sand-covered hands and all. "Without a doubt," he said softly. "Your mom was the bravest person I ever knew. She would be so incredibly proud of the little girl you're becoming." Sophie smiled, nestling against him briefly before returning to her construction project with renewed determination. "Then we should make this the best sandcastle ever. One that would make Mom say, 'Wow.'" "Absolutely," Michael agreed, his heart full. "The very best sandcastle on the whole beach." As they worked side by side under the California sun, Michael reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Not just the harrowing flight, but the 3 years of rebuilding their lives after Rebecca's death. They had weathered storms both literal and figurative, emerging stronger and more closely bonded than ever. The path forward wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges in balancing his new consulting role with his responsibilities as a father. Sophie would continue to have moments of grief and questions about her mother. But Michael was confident now in a way he hadn't been before, confident that they could face whatever came next together. "Dad, look!" Sophie pointed excitedly toward the horizon, where a pod of dolphins had appeared, their sleek forms breaking the surface in graceful arcs. "Dolphins, just like I wanted to see." "Make a wish," Michael suggested, remembering a tradition Rebecca had started during their honeymoon at this same beach. "Mom always said that the first time you see dolphins is special." Sophie closed her eyes tightly, her lips moving silently as she made her wish. When she opened them again, she was smiling with mysterious satisfaction. "What did you wish for?" Michael asked, though he knew the traditional rule against revealing wishes. Sophie looked up at him, her eyes, so like Rebecca's, shining with happiness and wisdom beyond her years. "I can't tell you, Dad, but I think it might already be coming true." As the dolphins continued their playful dance across the waves, Michael put his arm around his daughter's shoulders, feeling a profound sense of gratitude for Sophie, for the chance to protect others through his unique skills, for the promise of days ahead filled with both purpose and joy. Nighthawk would always be part of who he was, but Michael Carter, Sophie's father, was who he was meant to be.